Chapter 906. Father, quickly break this evil technique. Xian Xian is about to become a stone statue. Xian Xian is so scared. Immortal Loli giggled and said, but she did not look scared at all. Of course, she was not afraid. As long as Ning Fan was around, she would never know what fear was. Ning Fan's eyes swept across the vast sky. When he saw Immortal Loli and the other female cultivators gradually turning into stone, his eyes immediately turned cold. He did not reply, but anyone who was familiar with him would definitely be able to see that he was already angry. At this moment, on the shattered continent, be it cultivators or mortals, as long as they were women, they were all struck by the third progenitor's petrifying charm technique. More and more women turned into stone statues. Only female cultivators with slightly higher cultivation could slightly slow down the speed of petrification. However, even someone as strong as Venerable Miao Yan had half of her body petrified, let alone the others. The petrified woman would not die in a short period of time, but if the petrification charm spell was not broken as soon as possible, it was only a matter of time before she died. Ordinary methods could not break this petrification technique. Even Ning Fan, who was proficient in bewitching techniques, could not break this technique head-on due to his limited cultivation base. There was only one way to get rid of the petrification on all the women in the shortest time possible, that was to kill the person who had cast the technique. Even though Ning Fan had always been in the profound Yin world, he had already left behind a spiritual mark of the reverse spirit technique on the broken continent in the outside world. As soon as he appeared, a reversed spirit mark turned into a stream of light and flew out from the shattered continent. It flew in front of him and was swallowed by him. The moment Ning Fan swallowed the imprint, scenes of the third ancestor and fifth ancestor attacking him appeared in his sea of consciousness. In the blink of an eye, he understood everything that had happened here. Third ancestor Fan Ku. Fifth ancestor Fan Xianding. The invading enemies were two ancestors of the barbarians in history. In the past, the sixth ancestor, Fan Lianxiu, had also tried to invade them. In the end, he was killed by Ning Fan. When the sixth ancestor saw Ning Fan, his first reaction was to run away. As for the third ancestor and the fifth ancestor in front of him, their first reaction when they saw Ning Fan was still to run away. The two barbaric ancestors had sharp eyesight. How could they not flee when they felt a bone-chilling sense of danger from Ning Fan? In the eyes of the cultivators and barbarians, this scene immediately had an uplifting effect. Look, it's Immortal Master Zhao. Immortal Master Zhao has come to save us. Once he arrives, even the barbarian ancestor has to flee. The barbarians cried tears of joy. It's Senior Zhao. The cultivators excitedly cheered. Fellow Taoist Zhao is finally here. Mounz and the other three Broken Thought Realm ancestors sucked in a cold breath. They were happy about Ning Fan's arrival, but at the same time, they found it hard to believe that the two powerful barbaric ancestors would run away from Ning Fan without putting up a fight. The third ancestor and the fifth ancestor, who could even easily trap venerated Miao Yan, actually fled as soon as they saw Ning Fan. This was simply unimaginable. The 200,000 wild beasts raised their necks and roared at the sky. Their expressions were filled with fervor. Following Ning Fan's arrival, the fear that the wild beasts had towards the two barbaric ancestors' bloodlines had actually decreased significantly. He's fellow Taoist Zhao Jian. This aura is so familiar. Could it be? Venerated Miao Yan's beautiful eyes widened in shock. She recognized Ning Fan's qi, but she found it hard to believe. That day when she was saved by Ning Fan, she fell into a coma and did not have the chance to meet him face to face. This was the first time she felt Ning Fan's qi. She still remembered that she had once helped a junior block the 7 Truths 7 Illusions arrow in the past. That junior's qi was extremely similar to Ning Fan's. Could they be the same person? What made venerated Miao Yan even more surprised was the dragon horn longbow in Ning Fan's hand. She was the only one in this place who could vaguely recognize this bow. If she was not mistaken, this bow should be the bow spirit of the true dragon clan's ancestral bow. However, she did not know why it was in Ning Fan's hands. The arrow light of the 27 incense sticks flew around his body. Ning Fan glanced at the third ancestor and the fifth ancestor who were fleeing in panic. He did not chase after them. There was no need for him to chase after them. His left hand tightened its grip on the candle bow. His knuckles cracked. Slowly, he raised the candle bow and waved his right hand at the void space. Immediately, a six-colored incense stick arrow appeared between his fingers. He knocked the arrow and drew the bow. The action of drawing the bow and knocking the arrow was completed in one go. It was almost completed in an instant. The bowstring of the bow was extremely heavy. With Ning Fan's current cultivation base, he could only draw the bowstring by 1/3. Even so, as soon as the bowstring was drawn, the power of heaven and earth immediately gathered towards the arrowhead, making the six-colored light on the arrow even more dazzling. Faint dragon roars resounded between heaven and earth. On the body of the six-colored arrow, the shadows of 6 dragons with different colors could be vaguely seen. As soon as the shadows of the dragons appeared, the six-colored arrow immediately carried a trace of ancient aura force. It was as if there was a pair of invisible giant hands grabbing at the third ancestor. At this moment, Ning Fan loosened the bowstring and shot the arrow. He did not aim this arrow at the fifth ancestor but at the third ancestor. The speed of the arrow was too fast. Even an ancient immortal venerable would not be able to dodge it. It really is an arrow condensed from the Joss flames of slaughter. Seeing Ning Fan shoot the arrow at them without saying a word, the expressions of the third ancestor and the fifth ancestor changed. The reason why they fled as soon as they saw Ning Fan was because they were afraid of the 27 Joss flames of slaughter that were circling around Ning Fan. To be more precise, they were afraid of the 3 7-colored arrows among the 27 incense sticks. The power of the Joss flames of slaughter in those arrows was specifically targeted at the barbaric ancestor. Putting aside the 6-colored arrows, the 3 7-colored arrows were too ferocious. Even the third ancestor and the fifth ancestor sensed great danger from them and did not dare to face them head-on. Sensing that Ning Fan had drawn the bowstring, the third ancestor's eyes were immediately filled with fear. When he realized that the arrow was aimed at him, the shock on his face deepened. However, at the next moment, he realized that the arrow Ning Fan shot was not a 7-colored arrow but a 6-colored arrow that was slightly weaker. He could not help but snort coldly with a hint of disdain. This young man is really arrogant. Does he think that he can hurt me with just the 6-colored arrow in his hand? Humph. What I'm afraid of is not your 6-colored arrow but the 7-colored arrow. This arrow is nothing to be afraid of. Barbarian banners, get into formation and block this arrow for me. The third ancestor suddenly turned around and stopped running. The fifth ancestor also stopped running and looked at the incoming arrow with a cold smile. The third ancestor pointed his finger at the 6-colored arrow. Immediately, tens of thousands of blood banners appeared in the sky and overlapped with each other, forming tens of thousands of layers of barriers that blocked the incoming arrow. Even though the 6-colored arrow was fierce, its power was only enough to kill ordinary thought fragments. The arrow pierced through 3,000 layers of the blood banners before its power was exhausted and the body of the arrow collapsed. Seeing that the 6-colored arrow could not penetrate the blood banners and hurt him, the third ancestor snorted again with disdain. However, at the next moment, his expression changed drastically. After Ning Fan shot the arrow, he drew the bowstring again. This time, he shot 3 arrows at the same time. The 3 6-colored arrows merged into one. As soon as they were shot, the entire world was enveloped by the arrow intent of the 6-colored arrow. As the arrow shot out, it immediately pierced through the layers of blood banners. 3,000 layers, 6,000 layers, 9,000 layers. The 3 arrows pierced through the tens of thousands of blood banners and finally arrived in front of the third ancestor. A single 6-colored arrow might not be enough to break the defense of the blood banners, but 3 arrows at the same time were more than enough to do so. Seeing that the defense of the blood banners was broken, the third ancestor's eyes darkened. He sneered and raised his hand to grab the 3 6-colored arrows. From his point of view, the power of the 3 arrows was already at the end of its flight after breaking through the layers of blood banners. It was not worth mentioning. That was why he dared to grab the arrows with his hand. The speed of the incoming arrows had already been reduced. With the third ancestor's speed, he easily grabbed the 3 arrows. However, as soon as he grabbed the 6 colored arrows, his entire palm was burned by the Joss flame. He was not qualified to hold the arrows and it was difficult for him to hold them directly. Under the intense pain, the third ancestor had no choice but to let go of the arrows. At the next moment, he felt a sharp pain on his shoulder. The remaining power of the 3 arrows pierced through his shoulder, leaving 3 thumb-sized bloody holes. 6 colored flames were burning around the bloody hole, eroding his body bit by bit. The flames were extremely strange, as if they contained a trace of samsara chi. Even with the third ancestor's abilities, he could not extinguish the flames. All he could do was temporarily suppress them so that the flames would not spread to his body. Hiss! Damn it! This arrow actually contains a trace of samsara power. That's why the flames on the arrow can't be extinguished. The third ancestor was shocked. The power of the 6 colored arrows was not enough to severely injure him. However, the trace of samsara power that invaded his body was like maggots in his bones. It was extremely troublesome and difficult to get rid of it. Ning Fan frowned slightly when he saw that the 3 arrows had injured the third ancestor, but the injury was not serious. He drew the bow again. This time, he was not going to shoot the 6 colored arrows but the 7 colored arrows. With his current cultivation base, shooting 3 6-colored arrows at the same time was already his limit. He could not shoot 4 arrows at the same time. He had a clear understanding of this when he shot the 3 arrows at the same time. As for the 7-colored arrows, he could only shoot 1 arrow at a time at most. Moreover, it was not an easy task to shoot the 7-colored arrow. After shooting 4 6-colored arrows consecutively, he had already figured out the power of the 6-colored arrows. Next, he wanted to see the power of the 7-colored arrow. With the 7-colored arrow in his hand, he immediately felt a heavy pressure as if the heavens were pressing down on him. This time, it was obviously more strenuous for him to draw the bow than when he shot the 6-colored arrow. The 7-colored arrow was different from the 6-colored arrow. There were 7-inch-long grooves on the body of the arrow. In order to shoot the 7-colored arrow, he must first fill all 7 grooves. The moment he put the 7-colored arrow on the bowstring, he activated his magic power. His magic power immediately flowed into the first groove on the 7-colored arrow. The groove was like a bottomless pit. Even with Ning Fan's current magic power, he could only fill 1/10 of the groove. His magic power had been depleted, but he could not even fully light up the first of the 7 grooves. Inwardly, he was shocked by the consumption of the 7-colored arrow's magic power. He took a deep breath and began to crazily refine the 5 elemental spiritual items in his body. With the power of the great 5 elements physique, Ning Fan's magic power was replenished. Then, he poured it into the 7-colored arrow like a tidal wave. The first groove was gradually filled up and lit up with the first colorful light. Then, the second groove was also filled up and lit up with the second colorful light. A moment later, the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth grooves were lit up one after another. At the moment when the 7th groove was lit up, Ning Fan's entire body was covered with 7-colored flames as if he was burning. He seemed to have turned into a 7-colored fireman. He was holding a fire bow and a 7-colored fire arrow. He aimed at the third ancestor. All of a sudden, the third ancestor's expression changed drastically. He felt a chill down his spine. Before he could react, he felt a sharp pain in his chest and a bloody hole appeared out of nowhere. After that, the 7-colored arrow pierced through the air and penetrated him through the bloody hole. The light of the arrow was too fast. It was so fast that he was already hit by the arrow when he only saw a ray of 7-colored light flashing by. Karma. Karma is reversed. First, there is the effect of being hit by the arrow. Then, there is the cause of drawing the bow. This bow. This bow is hard to dodge. The third ancestor covered the bloody hole in his chest with his left hand. His eyes were filled with disbelief. On his chest, the place that was pierced by the seven-colored arrow was burning with seven-colored flames that could not be extinguished. With his current cultivation base, he could not suppress the flames at all. It spread crazily to his entire body through his wound. His body was engulfed in flames like a moth flying into a flame. Bit by bit, he was burned to ashes by the seven-colored flames. The dignified third barbaric ancestor had died under the seven-colored arrow. At the moment when the third ancestor died, the women who were in a petrified state began to undo their petrification. Third ancestor is dead. She was actually killed by this brat with a single arrow. The fifth ancestor was shocked. Both of his heads bit the tip of his tongue at the same time, spurting out blood essence to activate his divine ability. Immediately, a fiery cloud appeared beneath his feet. Stepping on the fiery cloud, the fifth ancestor's speed increased tremendously. He did not dare to fight Ning Fan at all. After witnessing the death of the third ancestor with his own eyes, he already had a deep fear towards the seven-colored arrow. The seven-colored arrow contained the chi of samsara power and the power to reverse karma. With his current strength, he would not be able to withstand the destructive power of the seven-colored arrow. He tried his best to escape. However, when Ning Fan drew the bowstring and knocked the second seven-colored arrow, his heart immediately sank into despair. At this moment, he had clearly distanced himself from Ning Fan. However, this distance could not be separated by karma. As long as Ning Fan draws the bowstring, he would suffer the karma of being injured and the karma of being struck by the arrow. This karma was unavoidable and unavoidable. At this moment, when he was in a desperate situation, the fifth ancestor's senses became thousands of times sharper than usual. He gradually sensed a trace of extremely well-hidden baleful chi from Ning Fan's body. That baleful chi was obviously accumulated when he killed the sixth ancestor, Fan Lianxiu. Who exactly is this brat? He killed the third ancestor with just a single arrow. Before that, he even killed the sixth ancestor. The fifth ancestor was greatly shocked. He desperately tried to escape. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain on his back and a bloody hole the size of a fist appeared. At this moment, Ning Fan had already drawn the bowstring. At this moment, the fifth ancestor's back was instantly wounded. At the next moment, the seven-colored arrow pierced through the sky and pierced through the wound on the fifth ancestor's back. The reason why the arrow pierced through his body was because it directly shot the fifth ancestor down from the fiery cloud. At the moment when he fell from the sky, the fifth ancestor's body was engulfed in seven-colored flames. Within the raging flames, the fifth ancestor was burned into ashes bit by bit. In an instant, only two heads were left that had yet to turn into ashes. In the face of certain death, the fifth ancestor's eyes flashed with determination. He suddenly muttered an incantation and self-detonated the crying head among the two heads. As the head self-detonated, an extremely weak blood soul suddenly flew out from the other head. Without saying a word, it fled for its life. The fifth ancestor was more proficient in escaping techniques compared to the third ancestor. That was why a blood soul could escape from the seven-colored arrow's injury. Seeing that the fifth ancestor's blood soul was trying to escape, Ning Fan's eyes flashed with mockery. Golden light shone under his feet and his speed was slightly faster than the fifth ancestor. With just a leap, he directly crossed an immeasurable distance and appeared in front of the fifth ancestor. The 5 fingers of his right hand reached out and grabbed the fifth ancestor's blood soul. With another leap, he returned to the sky above the broken continent again. Say, "Sir, please have mercy. This old man knows a huge secret, and it will definitely be of great benefit to you. As long as you swear the great oath of Heart Devil and let me go, I'm willing to tell you this secret. Do you know, the 9 Heavens Imperial Court?" After being captured by Ning Fan, the fifth ancestor's face was filled with fear. He gritted his teeth as if he wanted to tell Ning Fan some secret to save his life. In reality, however, the fifth ancestor was just trying to buy time with his words. Secretly, he was accumulating his remaining magic power to prepare some kind of escape ability. As long as Ning Fan listened to him and bought him some time, he would be able to display his ability and escape from Ning Fan's evil hands. Ning Fan had experienced a few life and death situations throughout his path of cultivation. Although he might not be as intelligent as a demon, he was also quite shrewd. From the fifth ancestor's expression, Ning Fan could see a trace of scheming and calculation. He had already vaguely guessed that the fifth ancestor's purpose of telling him these things was to buy time to escape. Ning Fan was not interested in the secret that the fifth ancestor was talking about. He also did not plan to give the fifth ancestor a chance to escape. He did not search the fifth ancestor's memories. Even if the fifth ancestor's blood soul was weak, his cultivation base was still heaven-defying when he was at his peak. Ning Fan could not search his memories. He simply activated the west wind technique. Immediately, waves of chilling autumn intent appeared on his palm. This technique was enough to easily kill the fifth ancestor who was in his blood soul form. Seeing that Ning Fan was determined to kill him without giving him any time to tell him the secret, the fifth ancestor knew that there was no hope for him to escape. His eyes were filled with hatred. Since you want to kill me, I won't let you have an easy time. Barbarian God Bone Sacrificial Technique. With my barbarian blood, bones, and life, I will create a barbarian talisman to imprison and kill this brat. I'm going to fight you to the death. Explode. Explode! Explode! The fifth ancestor's eyes were filled with madness. All of a sudden, his body erupted with red light that soared into the sky. The red light was too ferocious. The moment Ning Fan saw it, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. His eyes widened. Without saying anything, he directly sent the fifth ancestor's blood soul away and retreated. However, it was already too late. At this moment, the fifth ancestor's body was covered in red light that was as dazzling as the sun. His blood soul expanded little by little and then, it exploded. Compared to dying in Ning Fan's hands, the fifth ancestor chose to self-destruct. This self-destruction was not an ordinary self-destruction but an extremely terrifying barbarian technique. To barbarians, this technique was both an opportunity and a danger. However, to non-barbarian cultivators of foreign races, it was undoubtedly dangerous. The blood light that the fifth ancestor self-destructed turned into an ancient barbarian talisman. It pierced through the sky like a blood-red rainbow and went straight towards Ning Fan. The blood talisman was too fast. In just a flash, it had traveled across a vast distance and shot into Ning Fan's body. All of a sudden, a black-red barbarian mark appeared on the left side of Ning Fan's face. At the moment when this mark appeared, Ning Fan suddenly coughed out a mouthful of black blood and his eyes widened in shock. At the same time, the 200,000 wild beasts on the broken continent gave Ning Fan a monstrous killing intent. Even the blood seal in Ning Fan's body could not suppress that killing intent. For some unknown reason, these wild beasts suddenly became determined to kill Ning Fan. This is the barbarian summoning technique. Ning Fan's eyes darkened. He had seen this technique in the ancient books of the barbarians. The barbarians had a total of 7 kinds of lost abilities. It could awaken the young barbarian lord from thousands of barbarians. This technique was the most ferocious one. To non-barbarian cultivators, this technique was extremely destructive. It's definitely not a fortuitous encounter. Chapter 907. In the history of the barbarian tribe, there were 7 kinds of divine powers that could awaken the young barbarian lord from among the thousands of barbarians and allow him to inherit the position of barbarian ancestor. The barbarian summoning art was one of the fiercest of them all. According to some ancient records, among the 7 berserker progenitors, the 2nd and 5th progenitors were the most skilled in this art. This technique was divided into 3 levels: low, medium, and high. Once a person was struck by a low-level berserker summoning art, the blood in their body would burn away bit by bit. There was a 1 in 1,000 chance that they would be able to create the blood of the berserker ancestor. If they failed, their blood would be greatly damaged. Once a person was struck by a middle-rank berserker summoning art, they would fall into a deep sleep for 10,000 years. When they woke up, there was a 1 in 100 chance that they would be able to create the blood of the berserker ancestors. If they failed, they would lose all their power. A barbarian mark would appear on one's body after being hit by a high-grade barbarian summoning art. This barbarian mark was a fortuitous encounter, but also a dangerous one. The berserker mark was as tempting as poppies to any berserker beast. Once someone was hit by a high-level barbarian summoning art, all the wild beasts in the wilderness would go mad. They would do everything in their power to kill the person who was hit by the barbarian summoning art. That kind of madness came from the depths of their bloodline, and there was no way to stop it. The number of berserker marks would continue to increase as the number of people killed increased. If a berserker could survive the berserker beast's pursuit and increase the number of berserker marks he had to over 300 berserker marks, then he would have the right to refine the berserker mark into his body. Not only would his level of cultivation increase, he would also have a 10% chance of forming the berserker ancestor's blood within him and becoming a young minister of berserkers. Casting a high-level barbarian summoning art required the barbarian ancestor to personally cast it. It required a huge price. However, as the fifth ancestor was on the verge of death, he no longer cared about his own life. Naturally, he was not afraid of paying the price and forcefully planted this technique on Ning Fan. If Ning Fan dies under the relentless pursuit of the savage beasts, the fifth ancestor would naturally die without any regrets. However, the fifth ancestor also understood that they might not be able to take Ning Fan's life just by relying on the savage beasts. Fortunately, once this barbarian summoning technique is planted, it would attract the pursuit of the other barbarian ancestors. If that's the case, Ning Fan would really be in danger. I didn't expect that the fifth ancestor would plant a barbarian summoning technique on me before he died. Ning Fan's expression was uncertain. Although he was not a barbarian, he was a tribulation spirit of Taitsong. The barbarians were the slaves of the tribulation spirits, and the barbarian's bloodline was created by imitating the tribulation spirit's bloodline. An ordinary cultivator would not be able to benefit from the barbarian summoning art, but Ning Fan's could do it. However, before he could reap the benefits, he had to first solve the troubles caused by the barbarian summoning art. Due to the existence of the blood restriction, the 200,000 savage beasts on the broken continent were originally under Ning Fan's control. However, now that the beasts had already gone mad, the blood restriction could no longer suppress their killing intent. 200,000 wild beasts soared into the sky recklessly and charged at Ning Fan. They simply did not have the slightest bit of rationality left. Countless barbarians and cultivators panicked, they couldn't understand why these beasts would suddenly go berserk. Only a few people who had heard of the barbarian summoning art guessed the reason, and Venerable Wise Words was one of them. Not good, fellow Taoist Xiao has been hit by a high-level barbarian summoning art. Venerated Miao Yen was inwardly shocked. He immediately sent a telepathic message to Ning Fan to remind him. Fellow Taoist Xiao, be careful. Once you're under the effect of a high-grade barbarian summoning technique, all the wild beasts in the desolate land will become your greatest enemy. She had the intention to help Ning Fan deal with the beasts, but the bewitching art in her body had just been undone, so she couldn't use her magical power yet. The only thing she could do was to warn him. Immortal Loli also couldn't use her lightning power, otherwise, she would have already rushed out to help Ning Fan. In fact, there was no need for Venerable Wise Words to warn him. Ning Fan had lived in the desolate land for many years, so he had already seen the barbarian summoning art in the ancient books. Otherwise, he wouldn't have recognized it at first glance. The 200,000 wild beasts had already been bewitched by the barbarian summoning art. They were determined to kill Ning Fan and had lost all rationality. The beasts that were as large as small mountains soared into the sky and rammed towards Ning Fan. There were also hundreds of beasts at the Duzhen and Shikong realms that spurted out black and red barbaric flashes, intending to kill Ning Fan on the spot. Humph! Just a bunch of evil beasts, how dare you attack my master? Master, quickly let me shoot them down. Master's enemy is my enemy. Master's glory is my glory. The dragon horn Bao's voice was filled with righteous indignation. The Bao spirit had already received Ning Fan's promise. In order to obtain the reward from the purple gourd, it naturally wouldn't let go of any opportunity to show off. These wild beasts were once controlled by the demon race's forbidden blood. They had slaughtered barbarians and were also the initiators of the collapse of the desolate land. They were also standing on the opposite side of the barbarians. Therefore, the incense fire condensed from the burning joss flames of the barbarians was enough to hurt these wild beasts. Ning Fan didn't pay attention to the candle bough's words. He stepped on the golden rainbow and dodged the barbarian flashes that pierced through the sky. The black and red barbarian mark on the left side of his face constantly emitted a burning sensation, reminding Ning Fan that the 200,000 wild beasts in front of him were bewitched by the barbarian summoning art. They were already enemies and no longer his subordinates. He tried to break the barbarian summoning art in his body, but unfortunately, this art was extremely strange. Once he was hit, he couldn't break it at all. All of you, back off. Ning Fan used the power of the tribulation blood in this sentence. His words naturally carried the might of the tribulation intent. When his voice that carried the might of the tribulation intent entered the ears of the wild beasts, it immediately caused them to tremble violently. It was as if they were enlightened, causing them to be stunned on the spot. The voice that carried the might of the tribulation intent slightly dispersed the madness in the bloodline of the wild beasts. However, just a moment later, the wild beasts fell into madness again and surrounded Ning Fan to kill him. The bewitching power of the barbarian summoning art was too strong. The wild beasts were originally afraid of the might of the tribulation intent, but now, they were no longer afraid. Some of the wild beasts did not hesitate to ignite the beast blood in their bodies and self-destruct just to kill Ning Fan. Madness. All the wild beasts had gone mad. The first to bear the brunt of it was the self-destruction of hundreds of life immortal realm wild beasts. The chi wave that was produced directly pushed Ning Fan back 1,000 zhang. Even though he was not injured, it was not easy to deal with it. Then, another 10 duzhen savage beasts rushed towards him and self-destructed. The might of the self-destruction of 10 duzhen savage beasts was extremely terrifying. After all, Ning Fan's true cultivation base was only at the mid-duzhen realm. No matter how strong he was, he would not dare to face the self-destruction of 10 duzhen savage beasts head-on. Just as he was about to retreat, several shedding void savage beasts rushed towards him from behind. Without saying anything, they directly self-destructed. Moreover, there were more than one shedding void savage beasts. Thus, Ning Fan did not dare to face them head-on. The self-destruction of those shedding void savage beasts was like a secret signal. As soon as they self-destructed, the rest of the wild beasts actually ignited their bloodlines and self-destructed. 200,000 wild beasts went crazy and self-destructed at the same time. Perhaps even the immortal venerables of the ancient times would have to retreat slightly if they were to encounter such a terrifying force. Self-destruction, huh? Ning Fan closed his eyes and sighed inwardly. These 200,000 wild beasts used to be his beast army after all. Now, they had all self-destructed and died because of the barbarian summoning art. It was really a pity. If the wild beasts use other methods to deal with Ning Fan, he would probably be exhausted. However, if they self-destructed, in the void, Ning Fan was clearly at the center of the self-destruction storm. However, he did not try to avoid it. Instead, he directly entered the profound Yin world. Even though the self-destruction in the outside world was powerful, it could not hurt Ning Fan who was inside the profound Yin world. The cultivators on the broken continent could not see Ning Fan's movement of entering the profound Yin world. After all, Ning Fan was at the center of the self-destruction. Countless folds were formed in the hollow space due to the explosion. Their spirit sense could not penetrate into the void. When the aftermath of the self-destruction dissipated, the crowd of cultivators was shocked to find that Ning Fan appeared in front of them unscathed. Senior Zhao is really powerful. Even the self-destruction of 200,000 wild beasts could not hurt him. What exactly is his cultivation base? I initially thought that Senior Zhao was at the mid-shedding void savage realm when he was at his peak. However, it seems like I have greatly underestimated him. What mid-shedding void savage realm? I have served on Senior Mo Yunzi's spirit boat before. I heard from him that Senior Zhao's cultivation base is unfathomable. Perhaps he has already broken through the perception-breaking realm and stepped into the eternal era. Ning Fan naturally did not care about the discussions of the crowd of cultivators. The self-destruction of 200,000 wild beasts filled the void space with blood mist. The blood mist surrounded him and immediately flowed into his body due to the existence of the barbarian summoning art. There was originally only one barbarian mark on the left side of Ning Fan's face. However, after absorbing the blood chi of 200,000 wild beasts, new barbarian marks kept appearing. The second one, the third one, the fourth one. The blood chi of 200,000 wild beasts was enormous, but it only increased the number of barbarian marks on the left side of Ning Fan's face by 8. Including the first barbarian mark, Ning Fan had a total of 9 barbarian marks. The 9 barbarian marks formed the pattern of a leaf. The color of the leaf was black and red, making it look rather strange. If the number of barbarian marks reached 300, Ning Fan would have successfully awakened the young priest barbarian mark. Unfortunately, he only gained 8 barbarian marks after killing 200,000 wild beasts. If he wants to increase the number of barbarian marks through killing, he had no idea how many wild beasts he would have to kill to get to 300. Venerated Immortal, do you have any way to contact Venerated 6 Unity Immortal Venerated? Or perhaps, Venerable Miao Yen, do you know where Venerable 6 Unity is now? Ning Fan landed on the broken continent and asked Venerable Miao Yen, who had also landed. Venerable Miao Yen originally had a lot of questions to ask Ning Fan, but it was not convenient for him to ask them now. He just nodded and answered. I can't contact fellow Taoist 6 Unity, but I have a way to sense his location. However, my magic power has not fully recovered yet. I still need to adjust my breathing for a while before I can sense his location. If that's the case, Venerable Miao Yen, please take a rest. I won't disturb you any longer. After exchanging a few words with Venerable Miao Yen, Ning Fan sat cross-legged on the city wall. He closed his eyes and began to sense his surroundings, activating the reverse spirit technique. The reverse spirit technique was a type of sensing ability. It also had the ability to track one's senses in reverse. Ning Fan could feel that from the moment he was struck by the barbarian summoning art, he had been locked onto by countless chi. There were more than 10 million chi that had locked onto him. Basically, all of them were wild beasts. Those chi came from all directions. At this moment, he was afraid that all the wild beasts in the wild desolate had the intention to kill him. After all, the barbarian summoning art had the ability to summon all the wild beasts in the wild desolate to besiege him. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying a force it would be to summon tens of millions of wild beasts. However, what caught Ning Fan's attention the most was that among these chi, there were actually 4 chi that were completely different from the wild beasts. These 4 chi did not conceal the aura of the barbarian ancestors at all. Thus, Ning Fan was certain that these 4 people were the other 4 barbarian ancestors besides the 3rd ancestor, the 5th ancestor and the 6th ancestor. These 4 barbarian ancestors had also locked onto him with the power of the barbarian summoning art. Perhaps, they were heading towards this place to kill him, for barbarian ancestors and tens of millions of wild beasts. The barbarian summoning art of the 5 ancestors was really impressive. In just a short while, it had attracted countless strong enemies for Ning Fan. Ning Fan still had 26 colored arrows and 1 7-colored arrow in his hands. The only ones who had combat power that could fight against venerated immortal beings were Immortal Lowly and Venerable Miao Yen. No matter how he calculated, it would be a disaster to face tens of millions of wild beasts and 4 barbarian ancestors. The only thing Ning Fan could do now was to meet up with the 6 Unity Immortal Venerates and the others as soon as possible. Then, he could further increase his ability to protect himself. Not long after that, Venerable Miao Yen recovered some of her magic power and sensed the location of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerates. Under Ning Fan's control, the broken continent sped all the way to meet up with the army of the human race. At the same time, Old Ancestor Poisonous Dragon and Venerable Ao Xian's faces were filled with rage. 2 more rubies on the compass were broken. The ancient statues of the third ancestor and the fifth ancestor were also destroyed. The ancient statues of the other four ancestors could not be found, nor could they get in touch with them. However, what enraged them the most was the battle reports that kept coming back to them. There were reports from various demon clans claiming that the wild beasts under their command had gone out of control. All the wild beasts in the desolate land had gone out of control, and the reason was unknown. Somewhere in the Gate of Life, which was filled with cold chi, a true crossing realm dragon demon was leading thousands of wild beasts to hunt down a group of human cultivators. Of course, the strength of this dragon demon was far inferior to that group of human cultivators. However, the wild beasts under his command possessed terrifying combat strength and a large number of them. Therefore, it was a piece of cake for him to hunt down the human cultivators. Hee hee. How can you human ants escape from my palm? Hiss. What's going on? That demon cultivator Duzhen was wearing a cruel and complacent expression. However, all of a sudden, he could no longer smile. For some reason, the thousands of savage beasts under Zhang Xian's command suddenly broke free of the blood seal's control and abandoned him. After that, the eyes of the thousands of wild beasts were filled with killing intent as they flew towards a certain direction. All the wild beasts had left the battlefield. Only true dragon demon Du was left to face a large group of human cultivators. What was a reversal of the situation? This was a reversal of the situation. Hiss. How could this happen? Why did the blood seal go out of control? Where are these wild beasts going? Why aren't they listening to my orders? True dragon demon Du was shocked, while the human cultivators who were running for their lives were overjoyed. Quick! This old demon is alone. All the wild beasts have left him. Kill him. Although I don't understand what happened, it's definitely a good thing for us that the wild beasts have left. Kill! 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 The human cultivators swarmed forward and immediately turned this true dragon demon into minced meat. The same scene did not only happen here but also in countless other broken worlds. In a world with a whistling chilly wind, a thought-fragmenting demon cultivator was leading 300,000 wild beasts to chase after a human army. All of a sudden, all 300,000 wild beasts went out of control and left the battlefield. As for that thought-fragmenting demon cultivator, he was immediately besieged by the human cultivators. In a certain broken world, a group of human cultivators was flying cautiously. When they saw a large group of wild beasts flying past them, all of their faces turned pale with fright. Normally, when wild beasts encounter cultivators, they would definitely chase after them endlessly. However, the strange thing was that the wild beasts that passed by this place did not seem to notice the change in the group of human cultivators. They just passed by without killing any of them. The wild beasts that obeyed the orders of the demon race were gone. The ferocious wild beasts that would kill anyone they see were also gone. At this moment, all the wild beasts only wanted to do one thing, to chase after Ning Fan with all their might and kill him. The barbarian summoning art was a kind of temptation that came from the bloodline. It could make all the wild beasts in the desolate world put down everything and kill Ning Fan alone. As a result, all the demon cultivators were tricked. Countless demon cultivators were ruthlessly killed by the human race because the wild beasts suddenly left the battlefield. Unfavorable battle reports were sent back to the demon race, which made Ao Xian and old ancestor Poisonous Dragon even more shocked and furious. However, they did not understand what had happened. In the plan of blood sacrifice in the desolate world, the wild beasts were the main support of the demon race. Without the help of the wild beasts, the demon race would no longer have the advantage against the human race. Damn it! What exactly is happening in the desolate world now? Why would the wild beasts go crazy if nothing unexpected happened? We can't find the stone statue of the barbaric ancestor, and the wild beasts have also gone out of control. Is the plan of blood sacrifice really going to fail? Somewhere in the void, a two-headed old man was flying on a flying sword. His eyes were dark like the netherworld and had the ability to absorb people's souls. The flying sword under his feet was a blood-red bone sword. He was the first barbaric ancestor, Fan Sangu. The chi of a high-grade barbarian summoning technique. Judging from this chi, it should be planted by the fifth ancestor and not the second ancestor. The death chi in this barbarian summoning technique is very strong. It should be planted by the fifth ancestor after risking his life. Is the fifth ancestor dead? Humph. Who dares to kill the barbaric ancestor? Courting death. The eyes of the first barbaric ancestor immediately burst out with sky-piercing killing intent. He suddenly changed the direction of the bone sword and dashed towards Ning Fan's direction. On a certain broken continent, there was a gigantic tomb made of bluestone. The death chi around the tomb was extremely dense. There was a skeleton soldier patrolling every 100 steps. This gigantic tomb had already appeared on this continent a few days ago. The moment the tomb appeared, countless barbarians lost their flesh and blood and turned into skeleton soldiers. There was no chi coming from the tomb at first. However, the moment Ning Fan was affected by the barbarian summoning technique, the tomb exploded from the center. A stone giant with 2 heads sat up from the tomb and slowly turned into a 2-headed old man. Half of the 2-headed old man's body was made of flesh and blood while the other half was just a skeleton. His appearance was extremely strange. This person was the second ancestor, Fan Zong. Is the fifth ancestor dead? Hee, this hand-summoning barbarian art of his might become my nourishment. 9 barbarian marks. Not bad. It can be considered a small nourishment. It's a pity. I should wait a little longer. I need to be patient. The second ancestor's body swayed and disappeared from the place. At the same time, all the skeleton soldiers on the continent let out a miserable cry and turned into ashes. Somewhere in the Gate of Death, a plump 2-headed old man was sitting cross-legged on a gigantic blood shadow beast while cultivating. He was the 4th ancestor, Fan Shoufei. After sensing the chi of the barbarian summoning technique, the 4th ancestor slowly opened his eyes and revealed an extremely strange smile. 9 barbarian marks. Not enough. It's still not enough. Only when you have more than 100 barbarian marks will it be considered a great nourishment. The 5th ancestor is dead, but he has left us a great gift. Hee. The 4th ancestor licked his lips and flew out of the Gate of Death while riding the gigantic blood shadow beast. Among the 4 remaining barbarian ancestors, 3 of them secretly chased after Ning Fan. Only the 7th ancestor, Fan Ma Kong, was sitting in the void somewhere. His hands were still forming hand seals and he did not care about the barbarian summoning technique. His eyes were empty and his expression was numb. He did not have spiritual intelligence like the other barbarian ancestors. He was like a machine or a puppet. He only knew how to form hand seals over and over again. He did not seem to care about anything else. His mouth was chanting intermittent incantations from time to time. Every time he chanted the incantation, a gigantic shadow of a chessboard would appear beneath him and disappear in a flash. If the experienced 4 heavens old monsters were here, they would certainly recognize that the shadow of the chessboard was somewhat similar to the supreme treasure of the immortal Emperor Fate Master, the Karma chessboard. If Ning Fan was here, he would certainly notice that there was a faint connection between the 7th ancestor and the immortal Emperor Fate Master. Unfortunately, Ning Fan was not here and he did not see the shadow of the chessboard. Along the way, Ning Fan constantly encountered groups of barbarian beasts. As soon as they saw Ning Fan, they immediately rushed towards him. They subconsciously chose to self-detonate, wanting to kill Ning Fan. If it were those cultivators who did not have mid-kiliacosm treasures, most of them would have been blown to smithereens by the self-detonation of the barbarian beasts. Unfortunately, Ning Fan was the master of the profound Yin world. Every time he was attacked by the barbarian beasts, he would directly fly away from the broken continent and lure them to self-detonate at a distance. As long as he could escape into the profound Yin world in time, none of the self-detonation of the barbarian beasts could hurt him. Along the way, Ning Fan encountered 2 thought fragmentation realm barbarian beasts. The self-detonation of these 2 barbarian beasts caused the profound Yin world to tremble slightly. However, that was all. The damage caused by the self-detonation could not reach the profound Yin world at all. Since the self-detonation of these barbarian beasts could not kill Ning Fan, it was as if they were constantly sending him benefits. Ning Fan continued to absorb the blood qi produced by the dead barbarian beasts. The number of barbarian marks on his left side kept increasing. In the beginning, there were 9 marks, but now, there were 45 marks. The pattern on the left had also changed from 1 leaf to 4. Along the way, there were already nearly 2 million wild beasts who came to him to self-detonate. With countless precedents, Ning Fan was no longer worried about the remaining wild beasts attacking him. He was not afraid of self-destruction. The only thing he cared about was the 4 barbaric ancestors who had locked onto him. What made Ning Fan rejoice was that for some unknown reason, only 3 of the 4 barbaric ancestors were chasing after him. The remaining barbaric ancestor was different from the other barbaric ancestors. Even though he had locked onto Ning Fan with his qi, he did not bother to chase after him. If there are only 3 barbaric ancestors who come to attack us, once they meet up with 6 Unity Immortal Venerate, there's nothing to be afraid of. With 6 Unity, Miao Yen, Immortal Loli and Ning Fan's 7-colored arrow, the 3 barbaric ancestors would certainly not have a good ending if they come knocking on their door. I just didn't expect that the higher the level of the Berserker mark, the harder it is to increase the number of Berserker marks. In the beginning, I could gain 8 Berserker marks by killing 200,000 monsters. However, after 10 Berserker marks, I could only gain 4 to 5 Berserker marks after killing 2 to 300,000 monsters. Only those who have 300 Berserker marks can become the young priest of the barbarian race. In that case, it would be difficult for me to gather 300 Berserker marks even if I kill all the wild beasts in the desolate wasteland. Ning Fan shook his head slightly. Even though the number of Berserker marks was constantly increasing, he did not sense any substantial benefits. He was getting closer and closer to the location that Venerate Miao Yen had pointed out. According to Ning Fan's estimation, he would be able to meet up with the army of 6 Unity Immortal Venerates in a short while. After encountering another batch of wild beasts who self-detonated, Ning Fan absorbed the blood qi left behind by all of them. The number of Berserker marks increased to 46. The moment the number of Berserker marks reached 46, the pattern on the left side of Ning Fan's face suddenly changed. It was originally a pattern with 4 leaves. However, when the 46th Berserker mark appeared, a pattern of a 6-edged snowflake appeared between the 4 leaves. At the moment when the snowflake appeared, traces of barbaric blood were directly produced in Ning Fan's body. Barbaric blood was a type of bloodline that imitated the Calamity blood. Once it appeared in Ning Fan's body, it was immediately devoured by the tyrannical Calamity blood. After devouring the barbaric blood, the grade of Ning Fan's Calamity blood increased bit by bit. In just an hour, his Calamity blood had risen from 6 stars remnant blood to 7 stars remnant blood. 46, 4 leaves, 6-edged snowflake, the grade of the Calamity blood has actually increased. Ning Fan's eyes flashed. He suddenly felt a little expectant about the increase of the Berserker mark on the left side of his face. 45 Berserker marks did not have any effect. However, when the 46th Berserker mark appeared, he would be able to cultivate barbaric blood which could be used to increase the grade of his Calamity blood. 46 Berserker marks, huh? Even though it hasn't reached 100, it should be quite useful. Hee. It seems like I'm the first one to catch up to this young man. It seems a little troublesome. Should I attack this young man? There's actually a female venerate of the human race on this broken continent. Could it be that the 5th ancestor died in the hands of this female venerate? It doesn't seem appropriate for me to act rashly. Should I wait for the others? Far away from them, the 4th ancestor was sitting on the blood shadow gigantic beast. He was chasing after the broken continent with all his might. Suddenly, his expression turned extremely ugly. He had only taken a quick glance at them and he did not see through Ning Fan and Immortal Loli's strength. He only knew that there was an immortal venerate named Venerate Wise Words on this continent. Today, however, the chi of a second immortal venerate expert had appeared. Fellow Taoist Wise Words, I'm very happy that you can return safely. Not far away from the broken continent, the voice of a 6 Unity Immortal Venerate suddenly resounded. This place was already not far away from where the human army was. Just as the voice faded away, an army of the human army approached from afar to welcome the return of Venerate wise words. It's the voice of a 6 Unity Immortal Venerate. It's the Een High Army. One of the 6 Unity Army. We've finally met up with the main army. Immediately, the cheers of countless cultivators could be heard from the broken continent. Soon, they would reach the encampment of the human race. The fourth ancestor's expression was extremely unpleasant. If there was only one immortal venerate here, he would still dare to attack Ning Fan. However, if there was another immortal venerate, he would have to plan carefully. Let's wait a little longer. We'll make a decision after the other barbarian ancestors arrive. The fourth ancestor made his decision cautiously. I basically spent the new year lying down. Recently, my body has been very weak and I haven't updated a lot. I'm sorry. I hope that I can update steadily in the 3rd month of March and get a perfect attendance award. Ink was also feeling very pained during the days when there were no updates. He did not like his current appearance. Chapter 908. Due to the fourth ancestor's cautiousness, he did not dare to stay in this place for too long. He was afraid that the 2 immortal venerables of the human race would discover him and alert them. He concealed his chi and decided to leave this place temporarily. However, his chi was still locked on Ning Fan, waiting for the arrival of the other barbarian ancestors. The fourth ancestor's concealment technique was extremely profound. No one on the entire broken continent could sense his arrival and departure except for Ning Fan. Noticing that the fourth ancestor had left, Ning Fan frowned slightly but did not say anything. He shifted his gaze to the front and saw 16 spirit boats enshrouded in immortal chi sailing towards him from afar. On each of the spirit boats, there were many spirit flags with the words Een and Hai written on them. Ning Fan had heard about the 6 combat divisions under the command of 6 Unity Immortal Venerables. He had even saved one of the combat divisions, Zichou. Thus, he naturally knew that it was the Een Hai Combat Division that came to welcome Venerables Miao Yen. The commander of the Een Hai Combat Division was an early thought fragmentation realm old monster of the human race. His name was Sang Chong. As the 16 spirit boats approached him, Sang Chong immediately flew down from the spirit boats and landed on the broken continent. Then, he bowed respectfully to Venerables Miao Yen. Sang Chong naturally did not dare to show any neglect in front of a dignified immortal venerables. Subordinate Sang Chong welcomes the return of venerables. 6 Unity Immortal Venerables has issued an order to invite venerables to the Southly Fire Formation in advance. As for the people here, I'll lead them into the fire formation. Fellow Taoist 6 Unity has actually activated the Southly Fire diagram and set up the Southly Fire Formation here. Venerables Miao Yen was slightly surprised. The Southly Fire diagram was a 12 Nirvana post-celestial Nirvana magic treasure that 6 Unity Immortal Venerables had spent millions of years to refine. As far as she knew, the Southly Fire diagram of 6 Unity Immortal Venerables had yet to be completely refined. How could he already use this treasure to set up a fire formation? She spread her spirit sense to the void in front of her. At the end of the void, she saw a large sea of fire grand formation that suddenly appeared in the void. The sea of fire connected with the general momentum and formed a killing formation diagram. Within the formation diagram, there were tens of broken continents that were connected to each other, forming a gigantic continent. Nearly 1 million human cultivators were stationed on the continent. In the 3 directions of the continent, there were 3 towering peaks, arranged in a triangular formation. The first peak was 9,000 feet tall, the second was 6,000 feet tall, and the third was less than 1,000 feet tall. So this treasure has yet to be completely refined. It's still a half-finished product, huh? Venerated Miao Yen muttered to himself. He glanced at Ning Fan and pondered for a moment before speaking to Sang Chong. Since the 6 Directions Celestial Sovereign has invited me to meet him, I will make a move first. I will have to trouble Commander Sang to lead the others into the fire formation. As soon as he finished speaking, Venerated Miao Yen transmitted his voice to Ning Fan. Fellow Taoist Xiao, I owe you a debt of gratitude for saving my life. However, I have been unconscious ever since the day I was saved. Thus, I haven't had the time to repay you. At this moment, I'm anxious to meet fellow Taoist Lu He to discuss the important matters of the wildlands. Later, I'll come to find fellow Taoist and give you a precious treasure that I've kept for many years to repay fellow Taoist for saving my life. After making the solemn promise, venerated Miao Yen tapped the ground with the tip of his feet and flew away from the broken continent. In just a flash, he had already crossed countless voids and flew forward. Ning Fan looked at venerated Miao Yan's departing figure with a calm expression. The reason why he saved venerated Miao Yan was to repay him for saving his life that day. He did not really care about the precious treasure that venerated Miao Yan mentioned. Hee. I'm Sang Chong from the Yin Si War Division. Greetings, fellow Taoists. After venerated Miao Yan left, Sang Chong greeted Mounzi, old ancestor Jin Hua, Teng Nan, Teng Bei, and the other human broken thought realm cultivators who were controlling the broken continent. From Sang Chong's point of view, it was not surprising that the 4 human broken thought realm cultivators were able to make the broken continent fly like a postnatal magic treasure. What made him slightly surprised was that there were actually Berserker tribe mortals on this broken continent. In his opinion, this broken continent should be the temporary resting place of venerated Miao Yan. The human cultivators on this continent were probably the people that venerated Miao Yan had saved along the way. It was reasonable for venerated Miao Yan to save the human cultivators during the great calamity of the desolate world. But why did he save some barbarian mortals? Sang Chong could not figure it out. However, as far as he knew, the 6 combinations immortal venerated Miao Yan happened to need some mortals as sacrificial offerings. When the time comes, I can choose some of these barbarians as sacrificial offerings to the 6 combinations immortal venerated Miao Yan. The life and death of these barbarians is just a small matter. However, it concerns the safety of the human cultivators. I think venerated Miao Yan won't care about the lives of these barbarians. Sang Chong thought to himself. The 16 spirit boats led the broken continent forward at full speed. The journey was not far. Therefore, Sang Chong did not talk much with the few broken thought realm cultivators along the way. He knew nothing about what they had encountered along the way. Naturally, he did not know about Ning Fan's impressive achievements along the way. Therefore, Sang Chong had yet to see how extraordinary Ning Fan was. He also did not pay any attention to him. Even if he spoke occasionally, he would only talk to Teng Nan and Teng Bei. He did not talk much with Mounzi and old ancestor Jin Hua, the 2 old monsters of the Devil Dao. This was the problem with Sang Chong's personality. He was an orthodox profound cultivator. That was why he hated devil cultivators. That was the reason why he was too lazy to pay attention to Mounzi and old ancestor Jin Hua. Of course, the reason why he dared to slight Mounzi and the others was because his cultivation base was at the early thought realm like Mounzi. If Mounzi was a mid-thought realm devil cultivator, he would not dare to slight them. He still knew how to be flexible. Mounzi and old ancestor Jin Hua were naturally displeased by Sang Chong's cold attitude. However, they did not say anything. Soon, an endless sea of fire appeared in front of them. They were connected to each other and formed a formation diagram. This formation was called the Southly Fire Formation. It was created by the 6 combinations immortal venerated Jin Hua's semi-finished magic treasure, the Southly Fire Diagram. It was used to protect the human cultivators in this place. Even with his eyesight at the 2nd level of the heaven realm, he actually could not see through the mysteries of this formation at first glance. After activating the secret word force, he finally saw through all the veins of this formation. Inwardly, he was surprised by how extraordinary this formation was. This formation is extraordinary. It is transformed from a magic treasure, the fire diagram. However, that fire diagram seems to be incomplete. It is just a semi-finished product. The 3 fire mountains in the middle of the grand formation are the source of the power of this formation. The first mountain is 9,000 zhang tall. The second mountain is only 6,000 zhang tall and the third mountain is only 3,000 zhang tall. If this fire diagram is successfully refined, the last two fire mountains will also be 9,000 zhang tall. When the time comes, the three mountains will merge and the power of the fire will be stacked. The power of this formation is enough to threaten the life of an ordinary immortal venerated. As Sang Chong took out a fiery red token, a passage of fire immediately appeared above the Sea of Fire Grand Formation. Sang Chong suddenly activated his divine ability and transmitted his voice to the entire heavenly barbarian city. We are about to enter the central area of the Southly Fire Formation. This formation was created by a 6 combinations immortal venerated. The continents in the formation are arranged according to the fire mountains. Before entering the Southly Fire Formation, I want to inform everyone of the rules set by the 6 combinations immortal venerated. The first mountain is 9,000 zhang tall and is located in the north of the continent. That is the place where the 6 combinations immortal venerated goes into seclusion. Those who do not have a cultivation base at the second step are not allowed to step into the area of the first mountain. Those who are cultivators of the Gong sect are not subject to this rule. The second mountain is 6,000 zhang tall and is located in the southwest of the continent. Those who do not have a cultivation base at the void fragmentation realm or above are not allowed to step into the area of the second mountain. Those who are cultivators of the Gong sect are not subject to this rule. The third mountain is 3,000 zhang tall and is located in the southeast of the continent. Those who do not have a high cultivation base and are not cultivators of the Gong sect can only stay in the area of the third mountain and wait for orders. No mistakes are allowed. Apart from that, cultivators who are not cultivators of the Gong sect must also abide by the 9 orders and 16 prohibitions. Some cultivators of the Devil Dao must strictly abide by this order and are not allowed to disobey it. Sang Chong's cold eyes swept across Mounz and the others, secretly warning them. Then, he took out an imperial edict made of yellow silk and began to issue the various decrees of the 6 combinations immortal venerated. The cultivators in the heavenly barbarian city became spirited after hearing what he said. They engraved these decrees in their hearts and did not dare to disobey them. Some cultivators of the Devil Dao, in particular, were even more cautious in their words and actions after hearing these rules. They were afraid of doing something wrong and getting themselves in trouble. Everyone knew that the 6 combinations immortal venerated was an extremely old-fashioned cultivator who valued rules the most. Everyone naturally had to obey the rules set by the 6 combinations immortal venerated. Otherwise, they would be going against the 6 combinations immortal venerated. Rules. 9 orders and 16 prohibitions. He could naturally tell that all the rules set by the 6 combinations immortal venerated were targeted at cultivators who were not cultivators of the Gong sect. If one joins the 4 Puppets sect, he would not be restricted by any rules when he walks in this place. On the contrary, if one is not a cultivator of the Gong sect, he or she would be restricted by many rules. Ning Fan did not raise any objection to all of this. Now that he was under the protection of a 6 combinations immortal venerated, he naturally would not deliberately break the rules and challenge the dignity of a 6 combinations immortal venerated. The 16 spirit boats led the broken continent towards the territory of the third peak. After all, there were too many low-grade cultivators in the Heaven Man city and millions of mortals. According to the rules set by the 6 combinations immortal venerated, they were not allowed to enter the territory of the first and second peaks without permission. They could only come to the third peak. Under the power of Mounz and the other 3 thought-breaking realm experts, the broken continent where the Heaven Man city was located directly merged with the continent of the third peak and became one. Countless cultivators were already waiting at the foot of the third peak. Chen Zong was an elder of the vast cold sect in the northern heaven. However, judging from his appearance, he looked like a 70 or 80 years old mortal old man. In reality, he was a late shedding void realm expert. He led a small group of second-step cultivators of the vast cold sect and waited here because he sensed a trace of the qi of the vast cold sect's cultivators in the broken continent. Oh! Isn't this Elder Han Wu? Chen Zong stroked his long beard gently and smiled warmly. Then, he led a group of vast cold sect's cultivators towards them. Master Chen. You're here too. How would Fairy Han Wu dare to be negligent? Even though she and Chen Zong were both shedding void realm experts, Chen Zong was half a master to her. If it wasn't for Chen Zong's guidance in the past, she would never have the chance to step into the shedding void realm. Therefore, when Chen Zong arrived, she immediately went forward to greet him. After chatting for a while, Chen Zong suggested that Han Wu should go with the cultivators of the vast cold palace to the area of the first peak. Chen Zong was half a master to Fairy Han Wu. Of course, Han Wu would not dare to reject his suggestion. However, she did not want to leave his side either. Ning. Fellow Taoist Zhao, are you willing to go with me to the area of the first peak? With your cultivation base, even if you're not a cultivator of the puppet sect, you can still enter the first peak. Fairy Han Wu asked with a hint of hope. No, I think it's better for me to stay on the third peak. After all, there are a large number of barbarians who will be accompanying us this time. They can only stay on the third peak. I don't want to leave them behind. Ning Fan said helplessly. Then I won't go to the first peak as well. Just as Han Wu opened her mouth, she was interrupted by Ning Fan with a smile. Now that you've come to this place, you're already considered to be out of danger. You can follow the cultivators of your sect to the first peak. If you need anything, you can just come to the third peak to look for me. Han Wu pondered for a while and felt that Ning Fan's words made sense. If she wants to see Ning Fan again, she can just come to the third peak. She solemnly bowed to Ning Fan and thanked him for saving her life. Then, she followed the cultivators of the vast cold palace and flew towards the direction of the first peak. Her bow had shocked all the cultivators of the vast cold palace including Chen Zong. In their impression, Fairy Han Wu's temperament was cold and indifferent. She had never been kind to any man. Today, however, she was looking at Ning Fan with affection. Moreover, she even said that Ning Fan had saved her life. Ugh. Who is this ghost-faced cultivator? How could he make Elder Han Wu who has a cold temperament show such an expression? Each of the cultivators of the vast cold palace felt that it was inconceivable. On the other side, the four-eyed devil monarch had also found a few of his best friends. His friends were also from the Northern Heaven Corp's Devil Ancient region. They were a few late True Crossing Realm and Peak True Crossing Realm rogue cultivators. They were also resting at the first peak and invited the four-eyed devil monarch to go with them. The four-eyed devil monarch didn't hesitate. After repeatedly thanking Ning Fan for saving her life, he went to the first peak with his friends. Along the way, Ning Fan had saved many cultivators. When these cultivators returned to the encampment of the human race, they would naturally leave Ning Fan's side. Ning Fan didn't mind it at all. The cultivators who were saved kept thanking Ning Fan for saving their lives and left the third peak. In the end, even the cultivators of the Zichou Combat Division expressed their gratitude to Ning Fan. Sang Chang's expression finally changed. He began to pay attention to Ning Fan. He saw that among those cultivators who thanked Ning Fan, there were first-step cultivators, human profound and ghost profound life immortals, Du Zhen and Shikong true immortals. What surprised him the most was that even Teng Nan and Teng Bei who were early thought-shattering true immortals also expressed their gratitude to Ning Fan. They also thanked Ning Fan for saving their lives. Sang Chong was shocked. He initially thought that Ning Fan was at the mid-shedding void realm before being suppressed by the forbidden immortal force. But if Ning Fan only had this cultivation base, how could he have saved Teng Nan and Teng Bei's lives? Sang Chong knew that he had underestimated Ning Fan's true cultivation base. Ning Fan's true cultivation base couldn't possibly be at the mid-shedding void realm. Sang Chong even saw a trace of respect in Teng Nan and Teng Bei's eyes. Could it be that this ghost-faced cultivator is a mid-thought-shattering cultivator? Otherwise, how could he make Teng Nan and Teng Bei show such respect to him? What qualifications does he have to save their lives? Sang Chong thought to himself. If Ning Fan was really a mid-thought-shattering cultivator, it would be worthwhile for him to befriend him. However, Ning Fan's chi was extremely cold. With Sang Chong's experience, he could vaguely guess that Ning Fan was an evil cultivator. Although he hated evil cultivators, if Ning Fan's cultivation base was higher than his, he wouldn't dare to neglect Ning Fan. May I ask Brother Teng, what is the name of this ghost-faced cultivator? What is his background and what is his cultivation base? Why do you owe him a life-saving debt? Sang Chong asked Ting Nan and Ting Bei in a low voice after pondering for a moment. Before Ting Nan and Ting Bei could answer, Mounz sneered and looked at Sang Chong with disdain. You don't know Senior Zhao Jian? Aren't you a little too ill-informed? Sang Chong's heart skipped a beat. Did he hear it wrongly? Mounz addressed Ning Fan as senior. Mounz was a thought-shattering cultivator. Even if he was facing a peak thought-shattering cultivator, he didn't need to address him as senior. What kind of person could make Mounz address him as senior willingly? Could it be that this ghost-faced cultivator is an eternal ancient realm cultivator? Could it be that there is a third immortal venerable in the desolate land other than Miao Yen and Lu He? But how is this possible? There are less than 1,004 heavens immortal venerables outside of the secret races. I have never heard of an immortal venerable called Zhao Jian. Even in the thought-shattering realm, there isn't anyone with this name. Sang Chong's mind was filled with doubts. He secretly spread out his spirit sense and scanned Ning Fan's body. As soon as he did so, he felt a sharp pain in his sea of consciousness. His face turned pale with fright. Before the spirit sense that invaded Ning Fan's body could find anything, all of them strangely disappeared, as if they were forcefully devoured by something. He spread out his spirit sense again and again. However, each time his spirit sense disappeared into Ning Fan's body like a clay ox entering the sea. He couldn't retrieve it even if he wanted to. One should know that Sang Chong's cultivation base was at the early thought-shattering realm. Although his strength wasn't considered strong among those at the early thought-shattering realm, his spirit sense cultivation base was extremely high. His spirit sense cultivation base was not much weaker than some mid-thought-shattering realm old monsters. With his spirit sense cultivation base, even if the other party was a peak thought-shattering realm old monster, he wouldn't be able to intercept his spirit sense. At most, he would be unable to sense his spirit sense. However, Ning Fan was able to do such a thing. What did this mean? It was highly possible that Ning Fan was really an eternal ancient realm old monster. Sang Chong was still in shock. Suddenly, his face turned pale. At this moment, Ning Fan's eyes were as cold as lightning. Sang Chong was shocked. He knew that Ning Fan was angry and dissatisfied with his continuous spying. He immediately begged for mercy. Senior, please calm down. I didn't mean any harm by spying on you. Sang Chong didn't know that Ning Fan's cold gaze was not directed at him. Ning Fan didn't blame Sang Chong for spying on him. He didn't take the initiative to devour Sang Chong's spirit sense. The thing that devoured Sang Chong's spirit sense was the 46 barbarian marks on Ning Fan's left face. Ning Fan didn't know that even an early thought-shattering realm expert like Sang Chong couldn't probe him after he had these barbarian marks on his body. Once someone tried to probe him, his spirit sense would be forcefully devoured by the barbarian marks. These barbarian marks were very domineering. Moreover, it was fine that these barbarian marks devoured Sang Chong's spirit sense. After that, they seemed to have tasted the sweetness of success and became restless, wanting to devour the spirit sense in Ning Fan's sea of consciousness. What kind of person was Ning Fan? How could he allow the barbarian marks on his body to devour his spirit sense? His eyes were as cold as lightning. His gaze was naturally directed at the disobedient barbarian mark. This bold barbarian mark actually wanted to devour its master. No matter what, I have to erupt once today. It was cut off yesterday. 3 months, I can't be dispirited. Chapter 909. What kind of person was Ning Fan? How could he allow his barbarian mark to devour its master? His gaze sharpened, and the calamity blood in his body was immediately activated. The Tai Tsung calamity might filled his entire body. At this moment, the devilish nature in his body was so strong that it surpassed any of the other devil cultivators here. The barbarian mark was the divine ability of the barbarian tribe, so it was only natural that it was afraid of the robbery power. Therefore, once Ning Fan activated the power of the Calamity Blood, the backlash from the barbarian mark was forcefully suppressed in just a split second. Barbarian marks were domineering, but Ning Fan was even more domineering. His gaze was like cold lightning. Although it wasn't directed at Sang Chong, it still scared him. Sang Chong already believed that Ning Fan was an ancient immortal venerable and an old monster of the evil Tao. He could never afford to offend such a person. Senior. Junior Sang Chong really didn't mean to investigate you. If this junior knew that you were the eternal immortal sovereign, even if you beat this junior to death, this junior wouldn't dare to investigate you. I'm the trusted aide of a 6 combos celestial supremacy after all. If you want to attack me, you have to ask the 6 combos celestial supremacy first, right? Sang Chong groaned inwardly. Ning Fan, however, retracted the coldness in his eyes and said indifferently, just this once. Since the other party had mistaken him for the 10,000 ancient immortal sovereign, he did not mind pretending to be the 10,000 ancient immortal sovereign. Along the way, he had killed 3 barbaric ancestors whose cultivation bases were comparable to immortal venerables in front of everyone. Such an achievement was already shocking, and there was no way for him to conceal it. If he said that he wasn't an immortal exalt, there would probably be no one that would believe him. Moreover, it would most likely draw countless troubles to him. So, it would be better to pretend to be an immortal exalt, and it would be much more convenient for him to do things. Seeing that Ning Fan did not blame him, Sang Chong could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Seeing Sang Chong being humiliated, Mounz and old ancestor Jin Hua, who had always been treated coldly by Sang Chong, felt extremely pleased. They continued to tell Sang Chong about his glorious achievements along the way. For example, Ning Fan was not afraid of the dangers of the Gate of Death. He insisted on going through the Gate of Death and saved venerated Miao Yan. For example, Ning Fan had a daughter whose name was Xian. She could summon the Dark Thunder War Chariot, which was close to the 10th grade. Her strength was practically on par with venerated Miao Yan. Another example was that he had consecutively killed 3 barbaric ancestors who were comparable to immortal venerables. His strength had become even more terrifying. The more Sang Chong listened, the more astonished he became. He could not imagine that Ning Fan had a daughter who could fight against immortal venerables, and he himself had even killed 3 immortal venerables in a row. After the initial shock, they were overjoyed. Now that the desolate wilderness was facing a calamity, the safety of everyone would naturally be better protected with the arrival of an expert like Ning Fan. An hour later, Mounz and the others bid farewell to Ning Fan and went to the first peak. As for Ning Fan, he stayed on the 3rd peak. Before Sang Chong left, Ning Fan asked Sang Chong to stay behind. Facing Sang Chong's fearful expression, Ning Fan asked him many questions before letting him go. To Ning Fan's questions, Sang Chong told him everything he knew. He did not dare to conceal anything at all. Most of the things that Ning Fan asked were related to the collapse of the wild world. Not everyone had the right to know such information. However, Sang Chong believed that Ning Fan was qualified to do so. Today was the 5th day of the blood sacrifice in the wild wilderness. Ning Fan had just entered the 3rd peak of the Southly Fire Formation, and his name had already spread across the entire continent. More and more cultivators came to the 3rd peak because of his fame. They wanted to admire Ning Fan's demeanor. However, Ning Fan did not go to meet anyone. The Heaven Barbarian City was not far away from the 3rd peak. Most of the cultivators that he had saved had gone to the 1st and 2nd peaks. Only a few of them stayed on the 3rd peak. Currently, there were only Immortal Lowly, Lu Yan, Zhao Dai, Immortal Concubine Zhang Yu, Earth Devil and Daoist Iron Crow by his side. Ning Fan stood alone on the city wall of the Heaven Barbarian City with a solemn expression. Ning Fan had heard many things from Sang Chong. For example, he heard about the incident where Lu He and Miao Yan activated the Heaven Sealing Immortal Edict. The Heaven Sealing Immortal Edict could only seal the desolate wilderness for 7 days. On the 8th day, the power of the Heaven Sealing Immortal Edict would surely dissipate. At that time, the ancient passage that was sleeping in the ancient wild region would probably be summoned by the demon race. The demon race has planned so many things for the sake of heading to the ancient passage of the Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm. The ancient passage and the Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm. Ning Fan did not know much about the secrets of the Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm. However, it was not his first time hearing about it. The Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm was a place that was different from the 4 heavens and 9 worlds, the ancient devil's abyss and the land of demon spirits. In order to enter that place, one could only use the ancient passage. Having the passage alone was not enough. One would also need the key. Ning Fan had once searched through the memories of the candle bow. He knew that the previous owner of the bow, the ancestral dragon Zhu Li, had died in battle in the Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm. Ning Fan had no idea what kind of place the Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm was. It was the supreme secret of heaven and earth. It was not something that Ning Fan was qualified to know now. Besides, he did not plan to get involved in such a huge matter with his current cultivation base. The barbarian mark on the left side of his face kept giving him a feeling of being locked on. It made Ning Fan put away his thoughts for a while. He activated the reverse spirit technique and carefully sensed the wild beasts that had locked onto him. His brows gradually knitted together. Somehow, the chi of the wild beasts that were charging at him began to gather in a certain direction. In a world that was extremely far away from the Southly Fire Formation, the 4th ancestor was sitting on a blood shadow gigantic beast. They were discussing something with the 2nd ancestor. In front of the two of them, there were countless wild beasts that were charging towards them and gathering at this place. Seeing this scene, the 4th ancestor slightly narrowed his eyes and praised the 2nd ancestor. "2nd ancestor, you really have a good technique. These wild beasts have already been bewitched by the 5th ancestor. However, they can still listen to your orders. From this, it can be seen that your attainment in the barbarian summoning technique is definitely above the 5th ancestor." He. Barbarian summoning technique is just a small Dao. It's not worth mentioning. Speaking of which, why did the 5th ancestor's barbarian summoning technique only attract the 2 of us? Why aren't the other barbarian ancestors here yet? The 2nd ancestor's cold eyes seemed to be able to pierce through the void. He looked at the direction of the Southly Fire Formation and licked his lips. He kept telling himself in his heart that he must be patient. He must wait for Ning Fan to have more barbarian marks. Only then would it be more delicious. Moreover, he had already heard from the 4th ancestor that there were 2 immortal venerables of the human race in front of them. It would not be an easy task to capture Ning Fan in front of the 2 immortal venerables. He could only wait for the other barbarian ancestors to arrive before making his plan. With the strength of the 2 of us, we might not be able to defeat the 2 immortal venerables of the human race even with the help of millions of wild beasts. However, the other barbarian ancestors have yet to arrive. Should we take the initiative to contact the immortal venerables of the demon race and ask for their help? The 4th ancestor suddenly said. No need. Be it the demon race or the human race, they are all just different races. The cooperation between us and the demon race is just to make use of each other. Those who are not of our race will certainly have different intentions. Before our cultivation base recovers, it's better for us to have as little contact with the demon race as possible. As soon as the 2nd ancestor finished speaking, he sneered. Let's wait a little longer. When another barbarian ancestor arrives, we will take action and capture that child who is under the barbarian summoning technique. However, when the time comes, we must fatten him up before we slaughter him. Just 46 barbarian marks are not enough. I must at least help this child to attain 100 barbarian marks. In that case, it will be a great supplement. Ning Fan did not know that the 2nd ancestor was activating his divine ability to gather the wild beasts that had gone mad. Even though he did not know the truth of the matter, he could roughly guess that the sudden gathering of the wild beasts was not a good thing. At first, he was in silence. Then, he suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of the first peak. Suddenly, he saw a golden-colored messenger flying sword with royal chi coming from the direction of the first peak. It was flying towards him at full speed. The messenger flying sword carried the aura force of an immortal venerables. If Ning Fan was not mistaken, the owner of this aura force was none other than the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables. When the messenger flying sword reached a distance of 3 zhang away from Ning Fan, it immediately trembled and exploded, forming waves of qi. Within the qi waves, a cold and emotionless voice of a middle-aged man could be heard. Cultivator Zhao Jian, quickly come to the first peak to greet me. No mistakes are allowed. The qi waves formed by the explosion of the flying sword were strong enough to reach a cultivator who had ascended to the true origin realm. However, it naturally could not hurt Ning Fan at all. However, the arrogant messenger in the flying sword made Ning Fan's eyes instantly turn cold. After a while, he retracted his cold expression. He could naturally tell that the tone of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables was extremely unfriendly. It was certainly not a good thing for him to be summoned to the first peak. However, Ning Fan still needed to rely on the protection of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables to stay in this place. As long as he stays in this place, he must abide by the rules of this place and obey the 9 orders and 16 prohibitions of this place. Among the 9 orders and 16 prohibitions, the first rule was that cultivators who were not from the puppet sect must always listen to the orders of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables. Those who disobey the rule would be killed without mercy. Now that the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables had sent out a messenger flying sword to summon Ning Fan, he must go to the first peak. Otherwise, he would be regarded as disobeying the rule. You guys stay here and rest for a while. I'm going to the first peak. Ning Fan told Xian Loli and the others. Then, he tapped the ground with the tip of his feet and turned into a ray of golden light, disappearing in a flash. The distance between the third peak and the first peak was extremely far. However, with Ning Fan's speed, he naturally arrived at the foot of the first peak in just a moment. He raised his head and glanced at the first peak. His eyes were slightly solemn. He saw that the entire first peak was surrounded by tens of thousands of flame runes. They surrounded the 9,000 zhang tall mountain and spiraled upwards. On the second peak and the third peak, not a single blade of grass grew. Only the first peak was not only filled with many fiery red trees and flowers but also a majestic palace. That palace was the place where the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables resided. However, it was not an easy task to reach the palace. The flame runes that blotted out the sky and covered the earth were connected to the entire South Leaf Fire Formation. If Ning Fan directly flies to the top of the first peak, he would immediately trigger the runes and suffer the attacks of the entire South Leaf Fire Formation. Even though this formation still had its flaws, its destructive power was definitely enough to make Immortal Venerables stop in their tracks since the intruder was inside the Grand Formation. Only by climbing the stone steps of the mountain to the top of the peak would he not trigger the attacks of the flame runes. Cultivator Zhao Jian, quickly climb to the top of the mountain and come see me. If you can't do this, die. The voice of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables suddenly drifted down from the top of the first peak and directly entered Ning Fan's ears. Ning Fan's eyes turned slightly cold. What he hated the most in his life was being threatened by others. However, the fact that the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables threatened him with death had already violated his principles. If he were to travel here alone, he would definitely fall out with the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables just because of the threat of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables. Unfortunately, he was accompanied by the Immortal Loli, Zhao Dai, and millions of barbarians. For the safety of these people, Ning Fan had no choice but to rely on the grand formation of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables. He also had no choice but to endure this matter. He did not say anything else. Instead, he directly climbed the stone steps of the mountain and climbed to the top of the mountain step by step. When he reached the height of 1,000 zhang, thousands of flame runes suddenly rushed out of the mountain forest. They turned into a huge flaming hand and grabbed at Ning Fan. At the same time, the voice of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables resounded in Ning Fan's ears. Thousands of South Leaf Fire talismans will turn into a Leaf Fire palm imprint. It can kill a peak realm cultivator of the Crossing Truth realm. If you can't withstand this palm strike, you will die. This king doesn't believe that you're the immortal sovereign of all ancient times. This is a test. Ning Fan acted as if he did not hear the voice of the Six Unity Immortal Venerable. His expression did not change at all. At the moment when the flaming palm approached him, he suddenly opened his mouth and swallowed the flaming palm, which was powerful enough to kill a peak-crossing realm expert. Then, he continued to climb up without a change in expression, as if he was not injured at all. He continued to climb, and when he reached the 30,000 feet mark, another 3,000 flame runes suddenly flew out from the forest. They gathered together to form a huge cauldron of raging flames. It descended from the sky and pressed down on his head. The power of a single suppression was enough to kill any shedding void realm cultivator. In this desolate land filled with the power that forbade immortals, even an early-stage thought-shattering cultivator like Mounz might not be able to withstand the suppression of this cauldron, 3,000 southernly fire talismans to form the southernly cauldron. If you can't withstand this technique, you will die. The 6 combos Celestial Supremacy's voice was heard slowly. Ning Fan glanced at the fire cauldron coldly. Relying on the incredible power of his great 5 elements physique, he directly stretched his 5 fingers towards the sky and crushed the fire cauldron. Ning Fan swallowed all of the cauldron-breaking flames in one gulp. As for him, he continued to climb upwards and climbed all the way to the 60,000 feet mark. When he reached the 60,000 feet mark, the 6,000 fire talismans suddenly appeared and condensed into a beautiful fire devil lady with a voluptuous body. That beautiful lady's appearance was not considered as peerlessly beautiful. She could only be considered as an average beauty. However, her eyes were so charming as if water could drip out of them. As soon as she appeared, she immediately gave Ning Fan a flirtatious smile. Her eyes seemed to be able to ignite the lust of any man. That kind of lust was called the Southernly Fire of Lust. It could incinerate any mid-shedding void realm cultivator to death. 6,000 southernly fire talismans. Can you withstand it? The 6 combos Celestial Supremacy's voice slowly resounded. Before his voice could stop, it suddenly turned into a soft, eh. Ning Fan was not bewitched by the beautiful fire devil lady at all. He did not even feel a trace of lust just because of that beautiful lady's glance. It was as if he did not see the beautiful fire devil lady at all. He directly ignored her and continued to climb upwards. When the beautiful fire devil lady realized that she could not bewitch Ning Fan, she immediately revealed a look of hatred. She let out a sinister laugh and suddenly rushed towards Ning Fan. She even spat out a sword of void fire that was condensed from the fire of lust. She wanted to kill Ning Fan. The destructive power of this sword was almost at the level of a late-shedding void realm cultivator. Facing this sword, Ning Fan did not dodge at all. Instead, he allowed the sword of lust to slash at him. The sword was obviously extremely sharp. However, when it slashed at Ning Fan's body, the sound of metal colliding could be heard. Ning Fan did not rely on the defense of his physical body to block this sword. Instead, he relied on the 6 desires bone in his body. He had the physique of the 6 desires bone and the great 5 elements physique. He was not afraid of lust or fire. How could this sword hurt him? Stand down. Ning Fan suddenly turned his head and stared at the beautiful fire devil lady coldly. His gaze actually emitted a chilling aura, causing the fire talismans in her body to immediately go out of control. She let out a miserable shriek and directly exploded. Her body turned into countless fire talismans and flew back into the forest. After doing all this, Ning Fan continued to climb upwards. All the way to the peak, he did not encounter any more difficulties. At the peak of the first peak, there was only a lonely palace. When Ning Fan arrived at that place, his body flashed and directly appeared inside the palace. At the moment, there were 2 people standing inside the palace. One of them was a 6 Directions Immortal Venerate while the other one was Venerate Miao Yen. When the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate saw Ning Fan successfully arrive at that place, his eyes became extremely sharp. However, there was also a hint of surprise in his eyes. As for Venerate Miao Yen, she gave Ning Fan a friendly smile. However, there was also a hint of worry in her smile. She was worried about Ning Fan's safety. If Ning Fan encounters any danger on his way to the peak, she would certainly take action and save him. She would never allow the Six Directions Immortal Venerate to harm him. I wonder why the Six Directions Immortal Venerate has summoned me to this place. If there's nothing else, I will be returning to the third peak. Ning Fan and the Six Directions Immortal Venerate were 10 zhang away from each other. They stared at each other coldly. Even though his cultivation base was far weaker than the Six Directions Immortal Venerate, if they really fight, the Six Directions Immortal Venerate would not be able to gain any advantage. Cultivator Zhao Jian. Do you know which of the 9 orders and 16 prohibitions you have broken? The Six Directions Immortal Venerate said expressionlessly. However, there was an innate coldness and arrogance in his expression. Ning Fan did not answer him. He just stared at the Six Directions Immortal Venerate quietly. Seeing that Ning Fan actually dared to ignore his question, the Six Directions Immortal Venerate finally frowned and showed a displeased expression. Venerate Miao Yen slowly walked to Ning Fan's side and stood side by side with him. She used her actions to show that she was on Ning Fan's side. Her beautiful eyes turned slightly cold as she said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, what you're doing now seems to be different from what you've said before. Didn't you say that you summoned fellow Taoist Zhao here because you have something to ask of him? Why are you making things difficult for him again and again? This seems to be a little too much." Oh. Fellow Taoist Miao Yen seems to be very protective of this junior. If he really is an ancient immortal venerate, I naturally have something to ask of him. The previous test was just to confirm his cultivation base. There's no need for fellow Taoist Miao Yen to get angry. As soon as he finished speaking, the Six Directions Immortal Venerate looked at Ning Fan again. The coldness in his eyes faded slightly and he said, "I have set up the 9 orders and 16 prohibitions. The third order states that no one in the Southly Fire Formation is allowed to hide their identity. Otherwise, they will be regarded as someone with ulterior motives and will be killed. The sixth order states that no one who might endanger the safety of the fire formation is allowed to enter the fire formation. However, fellow Taoist Miao Yen told me that you are under the barbarian summoning technique of the barbarian race. Now, you are being chased by tens of thousands of wild beasts." After hearing what he said, Ning Fan looked at Venerate Miao Yen. Venerate Miao Yen revealed a guilty expression. She told the Six Directions Immortal Venerate about Ning Fan being under the barbarian summoning technique. Originally, she wanted to ask the Six Directions Immortal Venerate to help Ning Fan break the technique. However, she did not expect that it would become a reason for the Six Directions Immortal Venerate to pick a fight with him. "Cultivator Zhao Jian, you are under the barbarian summoning technique. You don't have the right to enter this place to hide. If you stay here, it is highly likely that you will attract the attacks of countless wild beasts. Countless cultivators will die because of you. This is not worth it. Even though fellow Taoist Miao Yen has asked me to help you get rid of the barbarian summoning technique in your body, why should I help you? All the more, you shouldn't continue to wear the ghost mask and hide your identity after entering this place. Take off your ghost mask and tell me your true identity. If you don't take off your ghost mask within 3 breaths. As soon as he said that, the Six Directions Immortal Venerate raised his finger and pointed at the ground. The entire first peak immediately shook and rumbled. The flame runes between heaven and earth surged madly towards Ning Fan as if they were going to attack him at any time. This time, it would no longer be 1,000, 3,000 or 6,000 flame runes attacking him. This time, it would be all the flame runes in the entire Southly Fire Formation. If the flame runes were to descend, it would be enough to kill all cultivators below the Immortal Venerable Realm. Enough. Venerate Miao Yan's beautiful eyes turned cold. He did not give those flame runes a chance to descend at all. He directly waved his hand and an extremely profound starlight was drawn between his fingers, dispersing all the flame runes. The reason why fellow Taoist Six Directions keeps making things difficult for fellow Taoist Zhao is just to find an excuse to test fellow Taoist Zhao's Immortal Venerable Realm cultivation base. Fine. I will do as you wish and test fellow Taoist Zhao's cultivation base for you. Of course, she would not attack Ning Fan. She produced a trace of purple starlight between her fingers and drew a line in front of her. The space in front of her was immediately cut open. What she opened was her natal kiliacosm. It was used to store some relatively precious items that she had to carry with her at all times. With a gentle wave of her palm, Venerate Miao Yen took out a treasure from her natal kiliacosm. She raised her head and smiled apologetically at Ning Fan. I have wronged fellow Taoist Xiao for what happened today. Initially, I planned to look for fellow Taoist Xiao after meeting Venerate Six Directions and give you this treasure to thank you for saving my life. Now, however, I can take it out in front of you and use it to verify your immortal Venerable Realm cultivation base. Naturally, I can make Six Directions speechless. Perhaps it was because she was too dissatisfied with Venerate Six Directions, Venerate Miao Yen did not even address him as fellow Taoist anymore. She quietly took out the treasure without a trace of reluctance or heartache. From her point of view, no matter how precious this treasure was, it was not enough to repay Ning Fan for saving her life. As the light of the treasure spread, Ning Fan's expression actually changed a little. As for Venerate Six Directions, he immediately became displeased and said with a stern voice. Miao Yen. You and I have already made a promise. After this treasure has been nurtured, you will sell it to me at the price of 3 monarch spiritual fruits. Why are you giving it to someone else? Promise? I seem to have only promised to consider this matter. I have never promised fellow Taoist anything else. Now, however, I want to give this treasure to fellow Taoist Xiao. He. What can you do to me? Venerate Miao Yen giggled and turned to look at Ning Fan. When she saw the change in Ning Fan's eyes which only flashed for a second, she could not help but praise Ning Fan's calmness inwardly. Chapter 9-10. Even a Six-Unity Immortal Venerate who had always been gloomy was extremely tempted by this item. He was even angered by it. Ning Fan, on the other hand, was only moved for a moment before he calmed himself down. Comparing the two of them, Venerate Miao Yen naturally valued Ning Fan more. What she took out was a small tree that glowed with 7-colored luster. It was planted in a jade pot. The soil inside the jade pot had a strong great Tao Qi. It should be Tao soil without a doubt. I didn't expect that what Venerate Miao Yen wants to give me is actually the Tree of 7 Wonders. Ning Fan was rather surprised. He took a light breath and said to Venerate Miao Yen. This item is too valuable. I can't accept it. His tone actually sounded a little decisive. After hearing what he said, Venerate Miao Yen looked at Ning Fan with even more respect and said with a smile, even though this item has a great reputation, it is just a seedling. Its value isn't as great as what fellow Taoist imagines. Fellow Taoist, you can just accept it. Could it be that in your eyes, my life is not as valuable as a small tree? Besides, don't you need a treasure tree like this to prove your cultivation base? What Venerate Miao Yen said was, of course, just a polite remark. Even if the Tree of 7 Wonders was just a seedling, its value was also immeasurable. It was definitely not something that could be bought with Tao crystals. The leaves of this tree were divided into 7 different colors. They were made of different materials: purple gold, silver, colored glass, crystal, shell, coral, and amber. Therefore, this tree could emit 7-colored light. The Tree of 7 Wonders that had yet to recognize a master was called a seedling. Once it recognizes a master, 7-colored runes would appear on the trunk of the tree. There were 2 ways to increase the number of 7-colored runes. One was when the tree recognized a master for the first time, and the other was when it was watered in the future. As the number of runes increased, the Tree of 7 Wonders would grow bit by bit. Every time it grew to a height of 100 zhang, it would provide certain benefits to the tree owner. When this tree grows to a height of 1000 zhang, it could even be used to refine innate magic treasures. If that was all, it was not enough to show the value of this tree. The biggest value of this tree was that it could protect the Tao protector of a person when it was planted to a height of 10,000 zhang and could increase the chances of becoming a sage expert. Of course, this was only a legend. Within the 4 heavens, the tree of 7 wonders was already rare, and no one had ever been able to grow it to a height of 10,000 feet. In the western heaven, there was a Buddhist emperor who, after a few trials and tribulations, managed to grow a tree of 7 wonders to a height of 3,000 meters, and refined it into a pre-celestial treasure. Among pre-celestial treasures of the same level, there weren't many that could withstand a single brush from the tree. Although what Venerable Miao Yen gave Ning Fan was just a young branch of the 7 wonders tree, its value was already extraordinary. In order to buy this tree from Miao Yen, the 6 combos Immortal Supremacy had even offered 3 monarch spiritual fruits. How much does the monarch spiritual fruit cost? If he sold it for Dao crystals, a D spiritual fruit could be sold for at least 2 trillion Dao crystals. Although this tree is young, it is already very precious. Immortal Venerable should keep it for himself. Before Ning Fan could finish his words, he was interrupted by a 6-unity Immortal Venerate. What he said makes sense. Giving him the tree is really a waste. Why don't you sell it to this prince? Venerated Miao Yen gently shook his head. He looked at Ning Fan and asked seriously. Fellow Taoist Xiao, do you really not want this tree? I have a habit that fellow Taoist Xiao might not know about. If something that I've given out is returned by someone, I'll destroy it directly, no matter how valuable it is. What she meant was that if Ning Fan refused to accept the tree, she would rather destroy it. If fellow Taoist Ning isn't willing to accept this tree because you're worried about the problem with the 7-colored rune, I've already thought of a way to help you cheat. The last sentence was said through voice transmission. First-step cultivators did not have the strength to make the sapling recognize an owner. If they forced it, the tree would devour their cultivation. Only second-step cultivators were qualified to recognize the wonderful 7 treasure tree as its master, but the number of 7-colored runes that appeared was different for different cultivation levels. Those who could cause 10 7-colored runes to appear on the tree of 7 wonders for the first time were at least at the Ghost Xian realm. To be able to produce 100 runes, one must at least have the cultivation of Duzhen. Those who could summon more than 1,000 runes at once were at least space shatterer cultivators. The only thing that could make the tree of 7 wonders produce 10,000 runes for the first time was the fragmentary thought. If an ancient immortal venerable recognizes the tree as its master, it would be able to produce at least 50,000 7-colored runes during the first time. Due to such a custom, Venerable Miao Yen took out the tree of 7 wonders for Ning Fan to recognize as its master to prove that Ning Fan had the cultivation base of an immortal venerable. To be honest, Venerable Miao Yen was not sure whether Ning Fan's real cultivation base had reached the eternal ancient realm or not. It was just a guess. If Ning Fan was really an immortal venerable, this tree could naturally prove his cultivation base. If Ning Fan was not an immortal venerable, Venerable Miao Yen had another way to help Ning Fan cheat and make the tree produce more than 50,000 7-colored runes at once. That way, 6 Unity Immortal Venerables would not have a reason to make things difficult for Ning Fan. To water the tree of 7 wonders, you must use the Dao Spring. I happen to have a small bottle of 6th grade Dao Spring. Once I use it. Venerable Miao Yen secretly transmitted his voice to Ning Fan sincerely. Ning Fan gave Venerable Miao Yen a deep look and replied through telepathy. Thank you. He was not a pretentious person. Since Venerable Miao Yen had already said so much, if he still refuses to accept the tree of 7 wonders, it would seem too pretentious. He was also not a person who did not know what was good for him. Since others were kind enough to help him, he naturally would not reject them coldly. I, Xiao, will accept this tree. Ning Fan took a deep breath and approached the tree step by step. He pointed a finger at the tree and a drop of blood essence immediately flew towards the tree. The expression of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables changed immediately. He raised his hand, trying to stop Ning Fan from recognizing the tree as its master. The tree of 7 wonders could only recognize one person in its entire life and it could not be changed. If Ning Fan recognizes this tree as its master, he would not be able to take it back even if he tries to snatch it. Just as he was about to unleash his ability, Venerable Miao Yen moved slightly to the side and stopped him in midair. I have already given this tree to fellow Taoist Zhao. Fellow Taoist Lu He, it's better if you don't act recklessly. I have another habit that you don't seem to know. If I find someone pleasing to my eyes, I won't allow others to harm him. Venerable Miao Yan's phoenix-like eyes turned cold. Her words were filled with hidden threats. Obviously, if Lu He insisted on attacking her, she would shed all pretenses of cordiality with him for Ning Fan. Lu He's gloomy expression changed rapidly. In the end, he suppressed all his dissatisfaction and put away his expression. He closed his eyes as if he was meditating. He would no longer stop Ning Fan from recognizing the Tree of Seven Wonders as its master. It was not worth it to offend Venerable Miao Yan for a sapling of the Tree of Seven Wonders. He looked down on Ning Fan. He could doubt Ning Fan's strength, but he would never doubt Venerable Miao Yan's strength. During the great calamity of the savage world, it was unwise to have an internal conflict with Venerable Miao Yan for a treasured tree, and Ning Fan, Teng Nan and Teng Bei have already reported to me about this young man's outstanding achievements. However, I don't believe that this young man can kill 3 immortal venerables in a row. If he really has such strength, why would he need to come to this Southleaf Fire formation? Why would he need to endure my provocation? He could just attack me directly. If he really has such strength, who in the savage world can stop him? Moreover, this young man has been affected by the barbarian summoning technique. If he stays in the Southleaf Fire formation, he will certainly bring me endless troubles. According to my character, I would naturally get rid of such troubles as soon as possible. However, Miao Yan has been protecting this young man. The only thing that I didn't expect was the importance of this young man in Miao Yan's heart. Forget it. I will give Miao Yan some face. Let's see how many runes this young man can make the Tree of Seven Wonders appear. Although Venerable Lu He closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep, his spirit sense was always paying attention to the Tree of Seven Wonders. Suddenly, his tone turned indifferent and said to Ning Fan, "How about we make a bet? If you can make the Tree of Seven Wonders produce more than 50,000 runes, I will give you 3 monarch spiritual fruits. If you can't, I won't hurt you as long as you leave the Southleaf Fire formation obediently. Do you dare to agree to this bet? If you don't, I won't force you." Ning Fan ignored Venerable Lu He. He would not easily make a bet that he was not confident about. At the moment when the blood essence flew into the Tree of Seven Wonders, he raised his palm and pressed it on the tree. Immediately, rays of 7-colored light enshrouded the Tree of Seven Wonders. Within the light, the first 7-colored runes began to appear and hovered around the Tree of Seven Wonders. After the first runes, the second, third and fourth runes appeared. Ning Fan closed his eyes. Beneath his eyelids, green light flickered intensely. Even though he did not open his eyes, he could clearly feel the flow of all the Tao laws surrounding the Tree of Seven Wonders. From the flow of those Tao laws, Ning Fan gradually gained enlightenment. The number of runes that appeared during the first acknowledgement of the Tree of Seven Wonders was certainly related to the cultivation base of the owner. However, it was also closely related to other factors. The same immortal venerables with the same amount of magic power, some of them could condense 50,000 7-colored runes while some could condense 80,000 or 100,000 runes. The first factor that determined the number of runes on the Tree of Seven Wonders was one's cultivation base, bloodline and Tao comprehension. Ning Fan's cultivation base might not be very high, but the grade of his bloodline was much higher than that of a 6-unity immortal venerate. As for the depth of his Tao comprehension, it had already reached the 2nd level of the heavenly being realm. There were only a few people in this world who could be on par with Ning Fan. 6-unity immortal venerates could not even be compared to him. With Ning Fan's cultivation base, he might not be able to make the Tree of Seven Wonders produce more than 50,000 runes. However, if he takes his bloodline and Tao comprehension into consideration, it would not be difficult for him to produce 50,000 runes. Are you really not going to accept this bet? The 6-unity immortal venerate spoke again. This time, Ning Fan looked at the 6-unity immortal venerate with a strange expression and asked in return. "Venerate, I think you will regret making this bet with me." "Regret? I have never regretted anything I do. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. What's won is won and what's lost is lost. My Tao is the Tao of an emperor. The winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. As long as we rely on our own capabilities, I will certainly not have any complaints. However, if I use other people's strength to cheat, I will definitely not sit and watch. The 6 Unity Immortal Venerate seemed to have expected that Venerate wise words might secretly help Ning Fan. Since Venerate never regrets his actions, I will accept this bet with you. Let's see if I can make the tree produce more than 50,000 runes with my current strength without any external help. Upon hearing his words, the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate burst into laughter. He opened his eyes and flicked his sleeve. Immediately, 3 brocade boxes appeared in mid-air and spun in the air. The 3 brocade boxes contained the monarch's spiritual fruits. They were the stakes of the bet. If he accepts the bet, he would naturally hand over the monarch's spiritual fruits. After all, he still did not believe that Ning Fan could produce more than 50,000 runes. He also did not think that he would lose. Ning Fan closed his eyes tightly. After making the bet, he did not say another word. His cultivation base was originally at the mid-crossing truth realm. Normally, cultivators at the crossing truth realm could only produce 100 runes. 7 colored runes kept appearing around the tree of 7 wonders. When the number of 7 colored runes reached 500, the rate of increase began to slow down. When the number of runes reached 800, the speed of increase was as slow as a turtle's crawl. When the number of 7 colored runes reached 926, it seemed to have reached its limit and could not increase any further. The 6 Unity Immortal Venerate was stunned. Could it be that Ning Fan's true cultivation base is just at the crossing truth realm? He could not produce 1,000 runes, but he had not even reached the standard of the shedding void realm, 1,000 runes. Even though he did not think that Ning Fan was an immortal venerate, he did not think that Ning Fan was just at the crossing truth realm either. Venerate Miao Yen, on the other hand, was even more certain that Ning Fan was not a cultivator at the crossing truth realm. She inwardly guessed that Ning Fan was probably doing something similar to storing his power, wanting to amaze everyone with a single brilliant feat. Of course, the two of them did not know that they had overestimated Ning Fan. The number of 926 runes was Ning Fan's true strength. If he only relied on his cultivation base, he could only produce so many 7-colored runes. However, if the grade of his bloodline is included, currently, I have 4 types of bloodlines in my body: Divine, Demon, Devil and Tribulation. Among them, the Tribulation bloodline has the lowest grade, which is only at the 7 stars broken bloodline. Ning Fan's eyes turned solemn. He secretly activated the aura force of the Tribulation bloodline in his body. He did not release the aura force at all but hid it in his palm. Even so, as soon as he activated the aura force of the Tribulation bloodline, the number of runes around the 7 treasures wondrous tree increased rapidly. 927 runes, 928 runes, 929 runes. The Taitsung Tribulation spirit with the 7 stars broken bloodline was equivalent to a late crossing truth realm cultivator. With the addition of the aura force of his bloodline, the number of 7-colored runes increased all the way to 1157 runes before stopping. The number of runes isn't increasing again. 1157 runes is equivalent to the early shedding void realm. The 6 Unity Immortal Venerate shook his head, thinking that the number of runes would definitely increase. At the very least, he had regarded Ning Fan as a thought-breaking realm cultivator. In his impression, the reason why Ning Fan did not die after being hit by Old Ancestor Poisonous Dragon's 7 Truths 7 Illusions arrow must be because his cultivation base was not within the range of the Duzhen and Shedding Void realm. Therefore, it was highly possible that he was at the thought-breaking realm. If Ning Fan really has the cultivation base of the thought-breaking realm, with some special techniques, it would make sense for him to perform the shocking actions of saving Miao Yen and killing the barbaric ancestor, 1157 runes. It's not his full strength. It should still increase, the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate thought with certainty. As expected, when Ning Fan withdrew the aura force of his Tribulation blood and activated the aura force of his Divine blood, the number of runes on the treasured tree increased again. The grade of Ning Fan's Divine blood was at the King grade. However, it was not an ordinary divine blood. Instead, it was the true blood of an ancient god. The true blood of an ancient god was extremely rare in the current world. Moreover, the number of his heart orifices had reached 3. In that case, his divine blood became extraordinary. As soon as he activated the aura force of his divine blood, the number of 7 colored runes immediately skyrocketed all the way until it reached 3072 runes. After the number of runes reached such a number, Ning Fan did not stop and activated the aura force of his demon bloodline again. His demon bloodline was the Fuli bloodline. The grade of his bloodline had reached the level of ancestral blood. Originally, he had 4 drops of ancestral blood. After burning 1 drop that day, he was left with 3 drops. A demon cultivator with 3 drops of ancestral blood would certainly be an immortal king realm old monster in any of the large true spirit clans. Therefore, as soon as Ning Fan activated the aura force of his demon bloodline, the number of 7 colored runes on the wondrous tree of 7 treasures immediately skyrocketed. In every breath, more than 1,000 new runes would be born. The speed at which the runes were increasing was absolutely shocking. Within 10 breaths, the number of runes on the treasured tree had reached more than 15,000. After 60 breaths, the number of runes on the treasured tree directly broke through to about 71,000. The 6 Unity Immortal Venerate took a step forward, as if he wanted to go closer to see if these runes were fake. After making sure that the runes were not fake, he carefully studied Venerate Wise words. His eyes were filled with suspicion as if he was doubting that Venerate Wise words had helped him. However, he saw a hint of astonishment in Venerate Wise words' eyes. Obviously, the number of 71,000 runes was not Venerate Wise words' help. Ning Fan condensed them with his own methods. Venerate Wise words was secretly shocked. What he was shocked about was naturally that Ning Fan condensed 71,000 runes as if there was no one else around him. An ordinary immortal venerate would definitely not be able to condense such a number of runes. Those who could condense such a number of runes were at least some powerful immortal venerates. 71,000 runes. Could this young man really be an immortal venerate? If he's really an immortal venerate, why? Hiss. The number of runes increased again. Venerate 6 Unity Immortal Venerate was already doubting his own speculation. At the next moment, his eyes widened again. When the number of runes reached 71,000, it stopped for a moment and then began to increase again. This time, the number of runes increased all the way to 110,000 before it stopped. This time, Ning Fan used the aura force of his devil blood. His devil bloodline was the Mo Luo bloodline, which was not as rare as the Fuli bloodline. However, he had 4 drops of ancestral blood, which was more than the Fuli clan's ancestral blood. Thus, the increase in the number of runes would not be too bad. The 6 Unity Immortal Venerate's eyes were filled with astonishment. 110,000 runes. Only an immortal king realm expert could achieve such a number. No. This young man is definitely not an immortal king. If he is an immortal king, I won't be his match at all. If I provoke him, he will definitely attack me. He isn't an immortal king, but how do I explain the number of runes? The 6 Unity Immortal Venerate was unable to calm himself down. Just as he was pondering, he suddenly saw Ning Fan open his eyes. He did not see the green light that flashed across Ning Fan's eyes. That green light was formed from all the green chi of the 2nd level of the heavenly being realm. He only felt that Ning Fan's eyes at this moment were filled with vicissitudes and strange. It was as if he could see through everything in the world. The 6 Unity Immortal Venerate had never seen anyone with such a strange gaze before. Even among the 28 ancient star constellation emperors of the 4 majestic sects, none of them had such a gaze. Even the gaze of a quasi-saint might not be able to see through people's hearts like Ning Fan. That feeling of being able to see through everything disappeared in a flash. It never appeared in Ning Fan's eyes again. It made the 6 combos Immortal Venerate feel as if he had seen through everything. It made the 6-Unity Immortal Venerate feel that the feeling he had just had was just an illusion. He did not know that that gaze was the result of Ning Fan using the green chi of the second level of the Heavenly Being realm. There were 3 variables that could determine the number of runes on the Tree of 7 Wonders: cultivation level, bloodline, and Tao comprehension. With Ning Fan's cultivation level, he could only make the number of runes reach 926. With the addition of the 4 grades of his bloodline, he could make the number of runes exceed 110,000. Now, he had the Tao comprehension of the second level of the Heavenly Being realm. With such a high level of comprehension, the runes surrounding the Tree of 7 Wonders kept appearing. 120,000 runes, 130,000 runes, 140,000 runes, the number of runes increased all the way to 1.35 million runes before stopping. Even ordinary immortal emperors would not be able to achieve such a number. Could Ning Fan be an immortal emperor? Of course not. The 6-Unity Immortal Venerate would not believe that Ning Fan was an immortal emperor. However, he could not understand how Ning Fan made the number of runes on the Tree of 7 Wonders reach 1.35 million. He stared at the Tree of 7 Wonders blankly as if he was in a daze. He almost suspected that this Tree of 7 Wonders was fake. If it's not fake, then this Tree of 7 Wonders must be damaged. No matter what the 6-Unity Immortal Venerate thought, his gaze when he looked at Ning Fan was no longer as rude as before. Instead, it was filled with fear. The more unknown something was, the more fearful it would be. The 6-Unity Immortal Venerate could not see what method Ning Fan had used to produce 1.35 million runes. It seems like I've won this bet. Ning Fan gave the 6-Unity Immortal Venerate a deep look, secretly warning him. He believed that even if the 6-Unity Immortal Venerate did not believe that he had an Immortal Emperor Realm cultivation base, he would certainly be extremely afraid of him because of the number of 1.35 million runes and would not dare to act recklessly. The 6-Unity Immortal Venerate did not have a good personality. However, he had always been willing to accept his loss. After all, this was the Tao that he cultivated and he would not easily go against it. In the end, he lost the 3 monarch spiritual fruits to Ning Fan. Suddenly, she sent a voice transmission to Ning Fan. Did you sprinkle a large amount of mid-grade Tao Spring on the Tree of 7 Wonders using a method that I can't see? No. Ning Fan gave Venerate Miao Yen a strange look. If he could really hide from Miao Yen and the 6-Unity Immortal Venerate's eyes and ears, he would at least have the strength comparable to an Immortal Venerate. He did not have such strength. However, Venerate Miao Yen would rather believe that Ning Fan had secretly done something that she could not see through. Ning Fan flicked his sleeve and kept the 3 brocade boxes that contained the monarch spiritual fruits. Just as he was about to keep the Tree of 7 Wonders as well, his eyes suddenly flashed with light. He saw that the small jade pot could no longer contain the roots of the Tree of 7 Wonders. The roots directly pierced through the pot like thorns and grew out crazily. As for the Tree of 7 Wonders, which was originally 7 chi tall, it began to grow at a crazy speed, absorbing the 1.35 million runes. In just 10 breaths of time, it had grown to 135 zhang tall. It directly pierced through the roof of the main hall and continued to grow upwards. Every time the Tree of 7 Wonders grew to a height of 100 zhang, it would give the tree owner great benefits. At this moment, the Tree of 7 Wonders that Ning Fan had subdued was already 135 zhang tall. Its height had exceeded the bottleneck of 100 zhang. Naturally, it would give Ning Fan a great benefit. Suddenly, 7 fruits flew out of the Tree of 7 Wonders. Each of them had different qualities. They were purple gold, silver, colored glass, crystal, shell, coral, and amber. The 7 fruits turned into 7 rays of light and directly flew into Ning Fan's dantian. Then, they directly melted inside his dantian. All of a sudden, 7 traces of energy appeared in Ning Fan's body. They flowed wildly inside his body and refined themselves, turning into Ning Fan's magic power. Ning Fan's cultivation base had already reached the mid-true crossing realm. However, after absorbing the energy from the 7 fruits, his magic power actually increased rapidly, all the way to the late true crossing realm. Only when it was close to the late true crossing realm did it stop. The whole process only took less than 10 breaths of time. However, the amount of Ning Fan's magic power had increased by more than a few times. Even though he had yet to break through to the late true crossing realm, it was certainly not far away from him. Planting a tree actually had such a benefit. All of a sudden, Ning Fan was looking forward to the Tree of Seven Wonders. What a pity. The fruits that grow from a height of 100 zhang are not very useful to us venerates. Venerate Miao Yen sighed softly and comforted Ning Fan. In her opinion, Ning Fan was a dignified venerate. He might not be satisfied with the energy contained in the 7 fruits. Of course, she did not know that Ning Fan had already obtained great benefits from the tree despite his low cultivation base. 3 chapters are completed. I will try to do 2 chapters tomorrow. Chapter 9-11. The 7 Treasures Wondrous Tree gave Ning Fan a huge boost in his magic power. The day when he broke through to the late true crossing realm was not far away. After keeping the 7 Treasures Wondrous Tree, Ning Fan looked at the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate and saw a hint of fear in his eyes. The 1.35 million 7-colored runes had successfully intimidated the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate. Even ordinary immortal emperors might not be able to achieve such a result. However, Ning Fan had done it. This young man is definitely not an immortal emperor nor an immortal king. Otherwise, he would be able to do whatever he wants in the desolate land. Why would he need to hide in my Southly Fire Formation? The reason why he could condense 1.35 million runes must be because he borrowed some kind of external force. Even though he did, it's enough to prove that he's extraordinary to be able to do it under my nose. This brat has a ghostly face, hiding his head but showing his tail. Even with my cultivation base, I can't see through his true cultivation base. But I think his cultivation base might really have reached the eternal ancient realm. If that's the case, even if I don't care about Miao Yen and just look at his strength, I shouldn't offend him too much. The 6 Unity Immortal Venerate's expression remained unchanged. However, he secretly decided not to provoke Ning Fan unless it's necessary. When he looked at Ning Fan again, his eyes were a little more polite. This was the result that Ning Fan wanted. With this deterrence, the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate probably won't find trouble with me anymore. Ning Fan thought to himself. Ning Fan was displeased with the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate's previous actions of making things difficult for him. However, he did not turn against him in the end. The Southly Fire Formation belonged to the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate. It was the base of the human cultivators and there were 2 human immortal venerates guarding it. Staying here could provide better protection for the immortal lowly, Zhao Dai, and the millions of barbarians. However, if he leaves this place, he might be attacked by a large number of savage beasts and barbarian ancestors. In order to use the power of the 2 immortal venerates and the Southly Fire Formation to protect the people of Heaven Barbarian City, Ning Fan did not want his relationship with the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate to turn sour. As long as this 6 Unity Immortal Venerate doesn't cross my bottom line, I can forget what happened today. Ning Fan's bottom line was the immortal lowly, Zhao Dai, and the millions of barbarians. For the sake of their safety, Ning Fan could tolerate what happened just now. For their safety, Ning Fan could also do all kinds of shocking things. This was the bottom line. This was his Tao. I already believe that fellow Taoist Xiao has the cultivation of an immortal sovereign. Therefore, I would like to make a request to fellow Taoist Xiao. I hope fellow Taoist Xiao will not refuse. The 6 combination celestial sovereign's tone was much more polite than before. Request. What does the 6 combos immortal supremacy want from me? Ning Fan's eyes flickered. If he followed his heart, he would not agree to any of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate's personal requests. This prince's request is not a private matter, but an official matter. This matter is definitely not beyond your ability. Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to worry about this, and I hope that fellow Taoist Xiao won't refuse. After saying that, the 6 combination immortal supremacy slowly stated his request. 1 hour later, Ning Fan and venerated Miao Yen walked out of the palace together and left the first peak. Ning Fan's expression was somewhat complicated. The 6 combination Immortal Supremacy's request was for Ning Fan to guard the 3rd peak of the Southleaf Fire Formation and become the peak lord of it. The Southleaf Fire Formation was the defensive grand formation of the human race's base. There were 3 fire peaks in the formation. Each of the 3 fire peaks was sealed with countless fire runes. Those runes were called Li Fire runes. The first peak was 9,000 zhang tall. There were a total of 9 million Li Fire runes sealed in it. The second peak was 6,000 zhang tall. There were only 6 million Li Fire runes sealed in it. The third peak was 1,000 zhang tall. There were only 1 million Li Fire runes sealed in it. The power of the Southleaf Fire Formation was closely related to the total number of runes that were unsealed in the 3 fire peaks. The more runes that were unsealed, the stronger the grand formation would be. The first peak had always been guarded by a 6 combination Immortal Supremacy. With his strength, he could barely unseal 7 million runes from the first peak. That was already his limit. As for the remaining 2 million runes, he could not unseal them. Before Miao Yan and Ning Fan arrived, the second and third peaks did not have any peak lords guarding them. Thus, the runes inside the peaks had always been sealed. The cultivation bases of ordinary thought-breaking realm cultivators were suppressed by the power of the forbidden immortal realm. Thus, they were too weak to unseal the runes inside the peaks. What the 6 combination Immortal Supremacy meant was for Miao Yan to guard the second peak and unseal the 6 million runes inside it. As for Ning Fan, he would guard the third peak and unseal the 1 million runes inside it. In that case, the total number of runes in the Southleaf Fire Formation would increase from the previous 7 million to 14 million. The power of the Grand Formation would at least double. If any savage beasts, barbarian ancestors, or immortal venerables of the demon race were to invade the Southleaf Fire Formation, they would be able to defend themselves better after the Southleaf Fire Formation was strengthened. I didn't expect that a 6 combination Immortal Supremacy would actually ask me to take over the third peak and become the peak lord of it. Ning Fan muttered to himself. Becoming the peak lord of the third peak and unsealing the runes inside it could increase the power of the Southleaf Fire Formation. It could then better protect the cultivators and barbarians inside the formation. This was not a personal request of the 6 combination Immortal Supremacy but an official matter. Therefore, Ning Fan did not reject it. I'm going to head to the second peak now. Fellow Daoist Xiao, you've been struck by the barbarian summoning evil technique of the 5th generation barbaric ancestor. Do you feel any discomfort? After flying out of the range of the first peak, Miao Yan suddenly asked Ning Fan with concern. It's all right. I don't feel any discomfort. Thank you for your concern, Venerable Supremacy. Other than the backlash of his barbarian mark, the barbarian mark on Ning Fan's left side did not feel any discomfort. Ning Fan responded with a kind smile towards Miao Yan's concern. To be honest, I have some kind of secret technique. If you have 3 immortal venerables to protect you, you can even break the barbarian summoning evil technique. However, this technique has a drawback. It might cost you some of your cultivation base. Initially, I wanted to ask fellow Daoist 6 combination to help you break the barbarian summoning evil technique. However, I didn't expect that it would bring you so much trouble. Fortunately, everything is over now. Miao Yan's tone was full of apology. If it wasn't for her revealing the fact that Ning Fan was afflicted with the barbarian summoning evil technique, it wouldn't have brought him so much trouble and almost caused him to fall out with Venerable 6 combination. Her intention was good, but she almost made things worse. Now, Lu He's attitude towards you has changed. If fellow Daoist Xiao needs it, I can ask Lu He to help. With the addition of your daughter and me, the 3 of us will protect you. I'm sure that we can break the barbarian summoning evil technique in your body. Fellow Daoist Xiao, do you need my help to break the barbarian summoning evil technique? If you need it, just tell me. Miao Yan's expression was very sincere. Ning Fan had saved her life. If he needed help, she would naturally not sit idly by. The barbarian summoning evil technique had brought Ning Fan a lot of trouble, but it wasn't completely without benefits. Ning Fan pondered for a moment and answered. Thank you for your kindness. Since Venerable has treated me with sincerity, I won't hide it from you anymore. This barbarian summoning evil technique may not be a bad thing for me. If I don't break it, it might even be an opportunity. I don't intend to break the barbarian summoning evil technique for the time being. If there's a need, I will certainly ask Venerable for help. Oh. The barbarian summoning evil technique of the barbarian race can become an opportunity for fellow Taoist? Miao Yen was slightly surprised, but she didn't ask any further. After knowing that Ning Fan wasn't troubled by the barbarian summoning evil technique, Venerable Miao Yen no longer mentioned this matter. After chatting with Ning Fan for a while, she returned to the second peak. As for Ning Fan, he returned to the third peak alone. After giving some instructions to Immortal Lowly and the others, he directly went to the peak of the third peak. The peak of the third peak was barren. There were no plants or palaces. As soon as Ning Fan stepped on the ground, a scorching wave of air rushed towards him. That wave of air was enough to threaten the life of a first-step cultivator, but it naturally couldn't hurt Ning Fan at all. With a sway of his body, Ning Fan went into the profound Yin world. Although Ning Fan suffered some difficulties when he was summoned to the first peak by Lu He, he also gained a lot of benefits. He obtained the 7 treasures wondrous tree from Venerable Miao Yen. As soon as he entered the profound Yin world, he planted the tree near the cave in the western world. Currently, the 7 treasures wondrous tree was already 135 zhang tall. If it grows to 2000 zhang tall, it would bring Ning Fan more benefits. In order to make the tree grow taller, he needed to increase the number of 7 colored runes on the tree. After the tree recognized him as its master, there was only one way left to increase the number of runes on the tree. And that was to water the tree with Dao spring water to accelerate its growth. Dao spring water was also known as the Great Dao spring water. It was a type of spiritual spring water that was rarely seen. It had 9 grades from the 1st grade to the 9th grade. The 9th grade was the lowest grade while the 1st grade was the highest. Along the way, Ning Fan had been killing people and seizing their treasures. Occasionally, he would also obtain some 9th and 8th grade Dao springs. Since they were useless to him, he could use them to water the 7 treasures wondrous tree. A small bottle of a 9th grade Dao spring water could be sold for 10 million Dao crystals. A small bottle of an 8th grade Dao spring water could be sold for 50 million Dao crystals. Ning Fan had a total of hundreds of bottles of Dao spring water in his hands. He watered the 7 treasures wondrous tree one by one. After watering the tree with hundreds of bottles of Dao spring water, the number of runes on the tree immediately increased slightly. There were about 200 more of them. More than 200 runes had only made the tree grow 2 inches taller. If these Dao springs in my hands are converted into Dao crystals, they are worth a few billion Dao crystals. However, they are only enough to make the tree grow 2 inches taller. Ning Fan was speechless inwardly. From the looks of it, it would be impossible to make the tree grow to 200 zhang tall without hundreds of billions of Dao crystals. This 7 treasures wondrous tree is really a money-burning tree. The Dao springs in my hands have already been used up. I can only wait until I buy some more Dao springs in the future to water the tree. Ning Fan then took out the 3 brocade boxes that contained the monarch spiritual fruits and studied them carefully. He had won 3 monarch spiritual fruits from a bet with a 6 unity immortal venerate. These monarch spiritual fruits could be considered as a great harvest. The monarch spiritual fruit was an immortal fruit that was unique to the southern heaven immortal world. After consuming it, it could increase the amount of sovereign qi in a cultivator's body. Having enough sovereign qi was one of the important conditions to advance to the immortal emperor realm. This immortal fruit could assist in the cultivation of sovereign qi. Therefore, it was naturally priceless. Every time a monarch spiritual fruit appeared in the world, it would be snatched by the old monsters of the eternal ancient realm. The energy contained within the monarch spiritual fruit was too massive. To consume it, one must at least possess the cultivation base of the eternal ancient realm. Otherwise, most of its medicinal power would be wasted. To Ning Fan, the eternal ancient realm was still very far away. My current cultivation base is still not strong enough to consume the monarch's spiritual fruit. I don't have to be in a hurry to cultivate my sovereign qi. I'll keep these 3 monarch spiritual fruits until I reach the eternal ancient realm. Ning Fan kept the 3 monarch spiritual fruits in his cave dwelling in the western world. With a flash, he left the profound Yin world and returned to the peak of the 3rd peak. He casually took out a small golden house from his storage pouch and activated it. The small house grew in the wind and slowly turned into a majestic golden palace. With a loud rumble, it landed on the peak of the mountain. This golden house was a heavenly dwelling magic treasure. Its grade was not high. Ning Fan could have as many low-grade magic treasures as he wanted. Ning Fan slowly walked into the golden palace and stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, waiting quietly. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, a group of cultivators flew to the peak of the 3rd peak and waited outside the golden palace. This group of cultivators consisted of 13 people. All of them were experts from the Shek Kong realm of the Yin Hai War Division. The person leading the group was the commander of the Yin Hai War Division, Old Monster Sang Chong. The reason why Sang Chong came to this place was because he had received the order from the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate to deliver the formation flag of the 3rd peak to Ning Fan. He held a jade box with a seal on it and said respectfully towards the golden palace. Junior Sang Chong requests to see Senior. Come in. Ning Fan said indifferently. Yes. Sang Chong led the group of Shek Kong realm old monsters into the golden palace and handed the jade box to Ning Fan respectfully. Junior has received the order from the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate to hand over the formation flag of the 3rd peak to Senior. Please examine it. Sang Chong did not even dare to breathe loudly in front of Ning Fan as he was afraid that he would anger Ning Fan. He also did not dare to spread out his spirit sense to check on Ning Fan. Ning Fan devouring his spirit sense had already left a shadow in his heart. Therefore, when he faced Ning Fan now, he could not help but feel a sense of respect. Is this the formation flag of the 3rd peak? Ning Fan tore off the seal on the jade box and took out a small fiery red flag. On the flag, the words 3rd peak of the South Separation Mountain were written in divine seal script. Only by possessing this formation flag could one become the peak lord of the 3rd peak and unseal the leaf fire runes on the fire peak. This formation flag had been specially refined by the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate. Without his permission, no one could activate the power of this flag at all. Moreover, if the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate uses his will, this flag would immediately return to his hand. No one could take it away from him. The flag has been delivered. Senior Zhao, please quickly activate your technique and unseal the 1 million runes on the 3rd peak. We are all fire cultivators. We are willing to stay here and protect Senior. Sang Chong's tone was extremely respectful, but he was complaining inwardly. The reason why the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate sent him here was to deliver the flag to Ning Fan and also to protect him. Unsealing the leaf fire runes was an extremely dangerous task. Even a 6 Unity Immortal Venerate would need someone to protect him from the side. On that day, the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate unsealed 7 million runes from the 1st peak and invited a total of 24 old monsters to protect him. Among the 24 people, 4 of them were thought-breaking realm experts while the rest of them had cultivation bases above Shikong. On that day, Sang Chong was not one of the protectors. Thus, he did not know the exact situation of the protectors. The only thing he knew was that after the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate successfully unsealed the 7 million leaf fire runes, among the 24 old monsters who were protecting him, 17 of them were severely injured while the other 7 suffered light injuries. Teng Nan and Teng Bei have been sent to the 2nd peak by the 6 Unity Immortal Venerate to protect Miao Yan. As for me, I was sent here to protect Senior Zhao Jian. Sigh. It's too dangerous to be a protector. I'm afraid I'm going to suffer some injuries today. Sang Chong sighed inwardly. The 12 Shikong old monsters behind him also had a sorrowful expression on their faces. The 13 of them each took out their Dao weapons and magic treasures to protect themselves. They surrounded Ning Fan and set up a formation in the palace. Each of them wore a solemn expression. Ning Fan did not pay any attention to these protectors. His eyes glowed with green light as he secretly activated the secret word, force, to study the situation of the seal on the third peak. At the same time, a rumbling sound came from the direction of the second peak. There was even a fiery light that soared into the sky. It was Miao Yan who was unsealing the Li fire runes on the second peak. Ning Fan was not in a hurry to unseal the runes on the third peak. Instead, his eyes narrowed slightly. Under the puzzled gazes of Sang Chong and the others, he walked out of the Golden Palace and spread his spirit sense towards the direction of the second peak. There were a total of 6 million Li fire runes sealed on the second peak. At this moment, there were runes constantly flying out of the second peak. Every time a rune flew out, the great momentum of heaven and earth would be disrupted, forming blades of great momentum that were hard to be seen by the naked eye and slashed down from the sky. There were a total of 16 old monsters who were protecting Miao Yan. 2 of them were thought-breaking realm cultivators. They were the commanders of Zi Chao's combat division, Teng Nan and Ting Bei. Among the 16 of them, some of them were constantly injured by the blades of great momentum. This was the danger of unsealing the Li fire runes. If it wasn't for Miao Yan's profound cultivation base which allowed him to suppress the great momentum with all his might, with just the cultivation base of Teng Nan, Teng Bei, and the others, they would probably be killed by the blades of great momentum. To others, these blades of great momentum are extremely dangerous. However, to me, Ning Fan turned around and returned to the Golden Palace. He stood in the middle of Sang Chong and the others again. After secretly activating the secret word, force, he raised the command flag in his hand. Seeing that Ning Fan was finally going to unseal the runes, Sang Chong and the other old monsters became nervous. All of them raised their spirits. As soon as the command flag rose into the sky, it immediately gave off rays of fiery light, directly causing the entire third peak to shake. At first, the shaking was very light. However, it soon became more violent, producing loud rumbling sounds. There were even fire runes that flew out of the fire peak recklessly, disrupting the great momentum of heaven and earth in this place. Rays of bright white sword light that were a foot long continuously appeared in the sky above the third peak. As soon as they appeared, they immediately slashed at the direction of the Golden Palace. These bright white sword lights were the blades of great momentum. In just a breath's time, they slashed the entire Golden Palace into pieces. The people in the Golden Palace were immediately attacked by the blades of great momentum. 10, 100, 1,000. As the number of runes that were unsealed increased, the number of blades of great momentum that fell from the sky increased. At first, Sang Chong and the others could still resist the blades of great momentum without suffering any injuries. However, when the number of blades of great momentum had exceeded 3,000, their defense began to falter. Some of the old monsters let out muffled groans and sustained injuries. Even though Sang Chong had the cultivation base of the broken sense realm, he still could not avoid getting some injuries. Ning Fan performed hand seals with all 10 of his fingers and activated the power of the command flag to unseal the Li fire runes continuously. He was also at the center of the attack of the blades of great momentum. However, there was not a single wound on his body. He was not harmed by the blades of great momentum that fell from the sky. In terms of real cultivation base, Ning Fan was not as good as Sang Chong or even any of the protectors here. However, in terms of controlling the power of great momentum, not to mention Sang Chong, even Lu He and Miao Yan, the 2 immortal venerables were not as good as Ning Fan who had comprehended the secret of the word, momentum. The current Ning Fan had already activated the secret of the word, momentum, to its maximum. He was clearly standing there without moving an inch. However, none of the blades of great momentum that were slashing at him would strangely deviate by an inch when they were about to reach him, avoiding his attacks. Sang Chong and the other 13 old monsters widened their eyes in disbelief when they saw what was happening. They could not understand how Ning Fan managed to avoid the attacks of the blades of great momentum. The abilities that were involved were too profound and they could not understand it. However, what puzzled them the most was the step that Ning Fan suddenly took. Ning Fan took a step forward. He did not use any abilities in that step, but it gave Sang Chong and the others an indescribable feeling of profoundness. It was as if he had stepped on the veins of the great Tao. Originally, the great momentum of this place was chaotic. However, after Ning Fan took a step forward, the chaotic great momentum actually calmed down bit by bit. 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps, Ning Fan slowly moved forward and took 9 steps. He used the secret of the word, momentum, in these 9 steps, causing the chaotic great momentum of this place to completely calm down. Ning Fan's mere 9 steps had suppressed the flow of the great momentum. The blades of great momentum directly collapsed in the vast sky. More and more flame runes rushed out of the 3rd peak and integrated into the entire South Leaf Fire formation. However, no blades of great momentum appeared anymore. Senior Zhao's abilities are really shocking. He actually managed to suppress the great momentum. What kind of ability is this? Sang Chong and the others were astonished. When they looked at Ning Fan again, their eyes were filled with unprecedented fervor. Even a 6 combos Immortal Venerable could not do this. However, Ning Fan managed to do it. Could it be that Ning Fan was not only an Immortal Venerable of the past 10,000 years but also an Immortal Venerable whose cultivation base was higher than a 6 combos Immortal Venerable? This young man has only taken 9 steps, but he can actually suppress the great momentum. On the 1st peak, the 6 combos Immortal Venerable who had been paying attention to the 3rd peak was shocked. His fear towards Ning Fan deepened. What he couldn't do was easily done by Ning Fan. On the 2nd peak, Venerable Miao Yen, who had successfully unsealed the 6 million leaf fire runes, had her beautiful eyes filled with excitement. As soon as she unsealed all the runes on the 2nd peak, she sensed the scene of Ning Fan suppressing the great momentum. She was both surprised and felt that it was only natural. After tens of breaths, the 1 million runes on the 3rd peak were completely unsealed by Ning Fan. At this moment, 14 million runes had been integrated into the South Leaf Fire formation. Its power had greatly increased. After Ning Fan, Sang Chong and the others finished unsealing the runes, before they could even take a break, the earth-shattering roars of beasts suddenly resounded in the distant void outside the fire formation. In the distance, more than 8 million wild beasts gathered together and rushed towards the South Leaf Fire formation. Behind the 8 million wild beasts were 3 barbarian ancestors who were following them from afar. Each of them had concealed themselves. These 3 barbarian ancestors were the 4th ancestor, the 2nd ancestor and the 1st barbarian ancestor who had arrived late. First ancestor, oh first ancestor. Aren't you a little too slow? However, since you're already here, we can finally take action against that brat who has been affected by the barbarian summoning technique. The 3 of us can display the strength of an Immortal Venerable while there are only 2 Immortal Venerables in the human race. It's not difficult to take down that brat. The 4th ancestor sneered. However, before we capture him, we have to give him a big gift first. I'll let him devour these 8 million wild beasts. We'll make our move after these wild beasts are all dead. We need to be patient. Let's wait a little longer. The 2nd ancestor smiled sinisterly and licked his lips. The 1st barbarian ancestor stood on his bone sword and calmly looked at the scene in front of him. His expression was cold and indifferent. Inwardly, he seemed to be very confident about capturing Ning Fan. His strength was the strongest among the 6 previous barbarian ancestors. Only the 7th barbarian ancestor, Fan Ma Kong, who had peerless innate talent, could be compared to him. When the 8 million wild beasts attacked, the human cultivators in the fire formation immediately exclaimed. They did not understand why 8 million wild beasts would attack them at all. They did not know that these wild beasts were attracted by the barbarian summoning technique in Ning Fan's body. The 6 Unity Immortal Venerable's eyes turned slightly cold. His expression was unprecedentedly solemn. He glanced at the direction of the 3rd peak and let out a sigh. Then, the coldness in his eyes disappeared. He deliberately made things difficult for Ning Fan and even wanted to chase him out of the fire formation. He was afraid that the barbarian summoning technique in Ning Fan's body would attract a large number of wild beasts to attack him. Unfortunately, he failed to chase Ning Fan away. Forget it. Since things have come to this, there's no point in talking anymore. This southerly fire formation is guarded by me, Miao Yan and Zhao Jian. Even if there are 8 million wild beasts, there's nothing to be afraid of. The Six Unity Immortal Venerable's eyes turned serious. He flew away from the first peak and flew into the sky. Fellow Daoist Miao Yan, fellow Daoist Xiao, I'll have to trouble the two of you to attack together with me. We'll control the 3 peaks of the southerly fire formation and repel these wild beasts. As soon as he finished speaking, the Six Unity Immortal Venerable raised the formation flag of the first peak and made a series of hand seals. Immediately, 7 million runes flashed across the entire southerly fire formation. They condensed into a heaven-engulfing fire palm and slapped at the wild beasts in the distance. The destructive power of that palm was not much weaker than the attack of an immortal venerable. In just a single strike, tens of thousands of wild beasts were killed at the center of the group. However, there were even more wild beasts whose eyes were filled with madness. They ignited their beast blood recklessly and directly crashed into the southerly fire formation. Yesterday's update was interrupted again. I'm sorry. I have to make up for it today no matter what.